It looks like we have a quorum, so I will call to order the Finance Committee of Tuesday, October 10th. This is a continuation of our meeting from yesterday, and ask staff to please call the roll.
Council President Curry, Alder Verveer,
Here.
Alder Vitever,
Present.
Alder Madison, Alder Madison,
Here. Can you hear me?
yes.
Okay.
Alder Evers,
Here.
Alder Rummel,
Present.
Mary of Quorum.
Thank you. All right, so we are in the briefings for the operating budget. We have today general government, administration, PCED, and transportation. So we'll just work our way through, starting with the municipal court, and Judge Koval is here. Judge?
Hi, good evening, everyone. So as you can see from our slide, we're really starting to continue to expand the online court participation. Since the pandemic, it's really blossomed into something now that most people are opting into, and it's actually beneficial in a lot of ways. It reduces anxiety for the participants, reduces costs in transportation, childcare, parking. And it's also for the victims a lot more satisfying not to sit in the courtroom all the time with someone who they think may have harmed them. So it's been very successful, and because of that, we can cut down on our security costs, which is really one of our largest expenses. So as more and more people are learning and adapting to doing this approach, I think it's gonna continue to reduce those costs. And that's really all I have to say, unless anyone has any questions.
Thank you, Judge. Are there any questions for municipal court? If not, thank you very much, Judge. We can let you get on with your evening.
Okay, thank you all. Have a good evening.
Just note that President Curry is here for the record. And we will go on to the administration agencies, starting with the assessor. Assessor Drea is here.
Hi, everyone. Thanks for your time tonight. We have a cost to continue budget primarily this year. Just as a review of the services that we provide, we discover, list, and value property, all taxable property in the city. And then we do a great deal of communicating and required reporting with the State Department of Revenue. So happy to answer questions about any of those pieces of what we provide, but that's the general idea of the services that we provide. You can go to the next slide, please. The only change in our budget, we are reclassifying a property appraiser 3 to a data analyst 3. We are transitioning to a new state-of-the-art software system. We acquired it last year. We are in the process. We're very excited to be in the process of migrating. We will need a modeler, and that in an automated valuation model system, we need a modeler who's able to create all the different algorithms that we will be using in a future state, which would be next year when we're valuing property. So we would like this person on board in the beginning of the migration to build the models, and then they have to be calibrated on an annual level. So it's a minimal cost impact, but it is a fairly significant shift in what our staffing needs will be in the future. So that is the only outlier in terms of what we have in our budget that isn't just a cost to continue. That's all I have.
Thank you, Michelle. Any questions for the assessor? Alder Verveer?
Thank you, Mayor. Hi, Michelle. Good to see you.
You too.
Thanks. My question is about the end of personal property tax in the state of Wisconsin, obviously coming in the new year. So first as background, how many of your staff were involved in personal property tax assessments, and what will their roles be moving forward?
Well, we had part of two different positions. So we had one appraiser who about a third of their job currently was allocated to personal property. And then we had one data analyst who about a third of their job was allocated to personal property. I don't want to toot my own horn, but we did see this transition coming a few years ago. So what we did was we migrated these positions so that we could, within their position description, just calibrate the percentage amount of time to what they're dedicated to personal property to shift to doing other things. So the data analyst will now fully be embedded in our data analyst track. And she's also our board of review clerk. So that third of her job shifts, and we've prepared for that. And we have the work to do, and it's transitioning to our new software system. And with our appraiser, we a few years ago recalibrated this position to be a hybrid appraiser. So he is technically now full-time on the commercial team, but he also, because we no longer have any, we don't approve of any overtime. So this position, a large part of their position is to back up any position in the office that needs it. It's very difficult to predict where the market will hit and who will get busy. And so we have one specific position who backs up anyone in the office who is getting overwhelmed due to market forces that we can't predict. So we've positioned ourselves to simply have to calibrate the percentage of time, and we've already contemplated where they will be spending their time now that PP is over. Does that answer your question?
Oh, yes. And I knew you saw it coming. I remember your nice op-ed piece in the newspaper.
Well, at first I was grumpy about it, but here it is.
Well, too bad the legislature didn't listen to you, but they sadly do when it comes to the city of Madison, obviously.
Right.
The other question I had is, obviously we're approaching the 1-year anniversary of the attachment of the town.
Mm-hmm.
And I was curious how things have gone from your perspective in terms of moving away from the town's contracted assessment, and how that was for your team members. Were generally speaking, were the town's assessments up to par, would you say, or was it quite a
would
sticker
not say
shock for the former town residents when your assessors took over?
I will be as candid as I can while still being diplomatic. So there's a little bit of a mess in the data that we took over. It was, I think Dave Schmidtke can attest to the bumpiness of the process. It was a little bit, due to the time of year, it was really tricky to get those parcels in live. We had examples of just a property listing that was terrible. You'd have a house sitting on 5 different parcels. And we never do that. You usually have just one home on one parcel. So it's just an example of the data. We had to combine a bunch of parcels. We had to clean up that data. The assessments on the residential side, they weren't terrible. So the hit that they got, because ostensibly the contract appraiser had done what's called a revaluation the year before. So that means that they attested that they visited every property. So on the residential side, they weren't super out of whack. The problem for the town, as we all know, so they did the revaluation and then they used some of their surplus budget to pay down the tax burden. So coming into our tax base, it was quite a bump just from those two choices that the appraiser and the town made. But in terms of the efficacy of the assessments overall on the residential side, there was some calibrating that needed to be done. On the commercial side, there's much more. It's just kind of all over the place. So we knew that it would be at least a year before we could get everything sort of the way that we want it to be. Our first kind of cut at it, I think, was pretty good. It will be another year before we have things where we actually really want them to be, particularly on the commercial side. But the residential as well had some tweaking. Did that answer your question?
It did. So
It was not fun, Alder Verveer. That's what I will say.
I'm sure it
I've
wasn't,
spoken to residents, but it was not great.
and still a work in progress, as you say, on the commercial side at least. Yeah.
Correct. Yep. And we've gotten the data almost where we want it. So we still have a dedicated Town of Madison team for at least one more assessment cycle. And then they will just be absorbed into the other assessment areas that we have.
Great. Thank you very much.
You're
Appreciate
welcome.
Thank you,
you.
Mayor.
Thank you, Alder. Alder Rummel?
Thank you, Mayor. So following up on Alder Revere's question, when I was last on the council, there were questions about the commercial valuation practices, and now with the town coming in, and I know there were legal challenges and all that. Can you just remind me of like the strategy that your office employed and how you think with the recalibration in the town, this will, affect those property owners?
Well, I just want to restate your question. So I just want to make sure that I'm understanding it. So if you're asking about our strategy for the town of Madison and what we're doing, we're trying to look and individually take a look at each commercial parcel and compare with their use and type, compare them with other types in the town. So for example, one example I can give you that's an easy one. Everybody knows the Clarion Hotel that's right next to the Energy Center. Well, that was carried as personal property because it was a building on leased land. And as you can imagine, it was wildly inappropriate. I mean, that's a depreciating methodology for an income producing property. So that's a problem. So we have it where that was an easy one to tackle. What we're trying to do is take a look at each type. We have some car dealerships, we have some strip malls, we have some, it kind of runs the gamut of what we inherited. And we're trying to take a look at each one to say, okay, where are they sitting versus other property types like this in the city? And we do have some calibrating for geography as well, but typically we're going to look at property type and use first. And then you take a look and see if geography is an additional impact to that. There's all kinds of different sources that we look at to set initial values, sales being the primary driver, but we do look at other things. So it's just taking some time to be particular with each individual parcel and then looking at use and then comparing it to the rest of the city to make sure that we have it right. The other consideration on both sides, residential, commercial, we wanted to be as cautious as we could be, as conservative as we could be, to try being mindful of the impact of coming into the city. It could have been more dramatic, but we are intentionally taking it slow, being mindful that this is a bump on both sides, residential and commercial. There's nothing that I saw that was going to go down in value. So it's just being mindful of how to do that while staying true to the state law and also trying to have some empathy for the owners of the property. We had another example I can think of is we had what was listed as exempt, which was really it was listed as a partially exempt property, but what it was really it was like an extended stay hotel and not exempt. So that's another example of something that we had to clean up. So it's just a lot of investigating. Did that answer? It was like, am I capturing what you're looking for, Alder?
I realized I did sort of combine two questions. So you definitely answered the second one because what sparked my question was the town of Madison. But I was recalling, when I was serving on the council previously, there was, some policy discussion on how we evaluate commercial properties and were we doing it, to the best practices. And, we faced some lawsuits. And I just kind of wondered if you could paint that big picture of how we decide. And, we did get some lawsuits and I don't know that we lost them, but I don't really know the details.
Sure. Well, we get sued every year. No one loves paying taxes, right? So, if I weren't doing if all things are quiet on that front, I'm probably not doing my job very well. So lawsuits aren't a huge surprise. If what you're referring to, we did have an employee who made some allegations about the prior mayor. Those, if you're asking me have candor there, I think those were unfounded. And then we did have an IAAO report, which is the International Association of Assessing Officers. We contracted with them at the mayor and I forget the other alder's name. Their behest was very smart. We had an independent group come in and evaluate our commercial appraisal practices and the outcomes. And we were held to be a really good example of commercial appraisal. So we had an independent international organization come in. The way we were doing things was found to be beyond what would be considered to be the sort of moderate line. We were above that in our practices for best practices, and our outcomes from a commercial perspective are great. We're in good shape.
Thank you. That I was remembering that whistleblower / whatever person.
Yep, I have lots of offline opinions about that, but perhaps not for today.
That's it. Thank you, Mayor.
Thank you, Alder. Any other questions for the assessor? If not, thank you, Michelle.
Thank you, Mayor. Thanks, everyone. Appreciate your time.
And we'll go on to the attorney's office. Attorney Haas?
Thank you, Mayor. I'm not sure if Michelle left, but I just wanted to say that on behalf of the city attorney's office, based on the number of lawsuits we are handling for the city assessor, she is certainly doing a good job. Our budget is a cost to continue budget. We just outlined here some very minor shuffling around of funds to try to reflect our current office operations, where we can save and places that we need to bump up the investment a little bit more. Again, very minor changes. We have 17 attorneys in our office, 8 support staff. Our total budget is about $3.2 million. I do want to thank the mayor and the council. We did add an attorney position this year. As you may recall, the council in this year's budget approved an attorney that is funded by our office and then 50% by Metro. And Eric Finch, we hired a few months ago, and he is devoting 50% of his time to Metro matters, another 25% to other transportation matters, and 25% to helping out with software contracts for all city agencies. So that has worked out well, and we appreciate having that additional position. Just guess a couple notes here about our office, including that we do every summer host either 2 or 3 law students through different clerkship programs. We didn't mention here the prosecution project, but we typically participate in that. And that's a way to help us give back to the profession, but also to develop interest in municipal law amongst law students. And in the past, we've ended up eventually having some of those students apply for positions in our office or other municipal attorney's offices around the state. And that just helps to develop our profession. On the next slide, just a couple of thoughts I wanted to highlight going forward. I think the 2 biggest pressure points for us and challenges are, one, in tax litigation cases. Those continue to come our way with some pretty significant I will say, cases and repeat customers who are suing the city for commercial assessments. Our attorney that handles that is a bit overloaded. She would probably say a bit is an understatement. We have tried to provide some assistance by having one of our municipal court prosecutors start to get trained in that area a little bit and help out with some research. But I anticipate that's going to be an ongoing challenge. We also are getting a little bit of relief in that regard, in that WMIC has some coverage to provide, to pay for outside counsel to handle those cases. And so with risk management's help, we added that coverage this year. There's going to be a little bit of lag because of when the policy kicks in. Really won't help us that much until probably next year. But the other big pressure point for us is with the number of real estate transactions and development projects and affordable housing projects that the city is involved in. Our attorney that handles those matters is Matt Robles. He's been handling that now for us a little over a year, maybe a year and a half. But as the council knows, there are just, it seems like additional projects, economic development projects coming our way on an ongoing basis. The council is talking about, for instance, additional land banking that's going to anticipate real estate projects, development projects now and in the future. And those continue to get more complex. We are hiring some outside counsel for specific projects just to have the time to dedicate to those. But it's not slowing down, and the projects are getting more complex. And that is an area that we're keeping an eye on, and not only for our office, but for the economic development staff and community development staff that are dealing with affordable housing projects in the CDA. So I guess just a reminder for every new initiative that the council approves and directs staff to implement. It's adding another item or items to staff's plate for the agencies involved, and then eventually for our office to get involved in. So it's something we're continually keeping an eye on and trying to find solutions to try to find efficiencies and ways to manage all of those balls in the air. So that is all I have, and I'm happy to try to address any questions.
Thank you, Attorney Haas. Questions for the attorney's office? Alder Vitever?
So just sort of piggybacking on what you said, Attorney Haas, I guess my question is just about compensation for attorneys going forward. I've been sort of surprised to see the rate of compensation and that it may not be terribly competitive with what is available in the rest of the market, and just wondering if, as we go forward, that will need to be taken into account.
Thank you, Alder. Do you mean with our job postings, or were you looking at budget information, or
job postings?
We have made a couple of changes working with HR. Typically our hiring is attorneys start out on our municipal court prosecution team, and often those attorneys, that's more of an entry level, and often we've hired attorneys that have only been out of law school a short period of time. We have, in the last year, hired a couple of positions that are doing the work for the agencies, representing the agencies. We've been able to fill those positions. It's a very competitive market for attorneys, and we're especially trying to have, to develop and market for very diverse applicant pools. That continues to be a challenge. Just whether you're in the public sector or the private sector, we hear that all the time from our colleagues in the legal field. HR, just a year or so ago, HR did do a bit of a compensation study or comparables, and I think we were comfortable with where we were at, but we did remove, I think, the bottom 2 steps of our wage scale. And then we also have, when we were posting positions, if an attorney has 3 or more years of experience, they do start out at a step above. And so, we would, I think in our last position that we just filled, we have an attorney that will be starting on Monday, and he will be focusing on representing the police and fire departments. Although that was not our initial intent when we posted the position, we were able to fill that position. We, I think, had 11 applicants that were passed along for interviews, but probably half of those were, just out of law school or a year out of law school. And this position probably, required more experience than that. So I think we've always ended up hiring quality people, but it's not like what I'm told, like the old days were, where we might have 30, 40, 50, 70 people applying for one position. And that's the market we're in. HR, I'm sure we'll talk about, as you know, a more overall compensation study. So we'll see where that goes in the next year or so.
Thank you, Elder. Other questions for the attorney's office? Seeing none. Thank you, Mike.
Thank you.
And we'll go on to civil rights. Dr. Davis is here.
Good evening. Thank you, Mayor. Good evening, everyone. Glad to be here with you. So I just wanted to give a brief overview of the department. I know many of you are familiar with the work that we do, but just to cover our different work areas. So within affirmative action, we help our organization contract, hire, and deliver services more equitably. We increase economic impact for historically underrepresented businesses. We increase equitable competition for jobs and contracts through building relationships and expanding the pool of local diverse talent. Within our Equal Opportunities Division, we lead nationally with equal opportunity protections, and we deliver tangible, often monetary awards for victims of discrimination and/or harassment. Within our newest division, Equity and Social Justice, we expedite services and resident requests for historically underserved communities and neighborhoods. We ensure meaningful access to city services regardless of ability and preferred language. We support the equitable design of city programs and services to mitigate unintended consequences and disparate impacts. And we provide active listening and learning from historically underserved populations toward better inclusivity and service delivery. So at the end of the day, we're all about providing access. And we do that primarily through providing education and accountability. Next slide, please. So our budget this year is primarily cost to continue. It does include from our special ACRE fund $85,000 for continuance of the ACRE program. You might recall that this program was previously authorized by the Common Council. It's a 3-year contract, and we'll be making a payment to LISC this year for the ACRE program. Also, just as a side note, earlier this year, or with the last budget cycle, the Common Council did approve $300,000 for ACRE pre-development funds. That fund is actually managed through the Economic Development Division, but the council also just recently approved the program for selecting ACRE graduates to receive that funding. So that's an ongoing program, ongoing contract with a set-aside fund. And then also inherent in the budget is an upgrade to our paralegal mediator position. I do want to say that there are a couple of other approval steps beyond the budget, but essentially this upgrade to the position will allow us to build on our existing successful mediation program for individuals outside of City Hall and bring some mediation services into City Hall for City of Madison employees to sort of supplement and augment our existing non-discrimination, non-harassment complaint program. Those are the major highlights for DCR, and I'll be happy to take any questions.
Thank you, Norm. Questions? Alder Madison.
Thank you, Mayor, and hi, Norm. I'm not going to pretend that I've had a chance to read through everything anyone submitted right now, but I am interested in the position that you brought up needing last year around budget season, because how we were taking on Town of Madison, there are more folks. I'm just interested in where that's at, if at all. Sure,
thank you. Yes, I understand that there's a lot to consider in the budget. Funds are limited. We did include within our supplemental request an equal opportunity investigator that would give us increased capacity for serving members of the public. We're seeing much more activity for our complaints from members of the public. And we've started to implement an abeyance process so that when we receive the complaints, we're not able to actually open the complaint right away. They have to go into a queue so that we can manage them. So it's I won't say it's creating a backlog necessarily, but it's where the time to process our complaints is starting to increase. And so we were seeking an additional position within our supplementals. However, it's not represented in the executive budget.
Thank you. I'll reach out offline or, out of this.
Thank you.
Thank you, Alder. Other questions for civil rights? If not, thank you, Norm.
Thank you.
Okay, we'll go on to the clerk's office, and Clerk Witzel-Bell is here.
Thank you. Our budget request is basically to carry on, and we have 3 vacancies that are being filled prior to 2024, including 2 bilingual positions. And that should be helpful with licensing and elections and community engagement. We also will be returning to the City County building in 2024. And for those of you who are relatively new, we have 4 elections in even numbered years and 2 elections in odd numbered years. So that's why it might be funny to look at our budget and see that next year our budget is more than it was this year. We also are looking at shifting from the tedious manual assembly of absentee ballot mailings to an automated process using a machine, and then that would help save some funding for election officials to come in and manually assemble absentee ballot mailings. And then we could use a couple of poll workers to instead help answer the phones, and people wouldn't have to wait in the queue quite so long to get assistance on the phone at election time. And I only put together 1 slide to try to keep it short and sweet. So with that, I'm happy to answer any questions you may have.
Thanks, Mary Beth. Any questions for the clerk? President Curry?
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Hi, Mary Beth. I also will kitty cat off of what Alder Madison said of not having been able to read all the way through. Your first point of adding 2 positions and specifically bilingual and saying that they would help with some of the licensing. Maybe a couple of months ago, it came up at council with a non-English speaking applicant that appeared to have some difficulties understanding process. Could you break down what, if any of those three positions, like percentage wise, or how much time that they would spend with alcohol licensing and entertainment licenses?
Well, not just alcohol licensing and entertainment, but a lot of health licenses as well. We find that we need interpreters, and that's readily available, but it will be, I think, incredibly helpful to have somebody on staff who understands the complexity of each of those licensing systems, complex because of the state statutes that we're following. It's not necessarily logical or just a few steps. And then to be able to communicate those technical details in somebody's first language can help save a lot of frustration and headaches for our customers. What percentage of time that will require, I am not positive, but in doing the equity analysis to hire the position that was created in the last budget for a bilingual position in the clerk's office, it was determined that having just one bilingual position would cause almost immediate burnout. So we got permission to take one of our other vacant positions and make that bilingual to be able to more fully support that work.
Okay, thank you.
Mm-hmm.
Thank you, Alder. Vice President Figueroa Cole.
Thank you, Mayor. So for these bilingual positions, are they all one language or are you looking for multiple languages?
We are looking for 2 bilingual employees who speak Spanish fluently.
Okay, so then that way you can use the interpreter people for the other languages, I suppose.
We would still continue using the city's interpretation services for other languages and as needed for Spanish as well. But we wouldn't have these new employees do the translation for printed documents. We would still use civil rights for that function and then have these employees take a look at what comes back to us to make sure that the translation is accurate and readable with all the technical aspects of what we're trying to communicate.
I wasn't going to bring that up, but thank you for saying that.
Sure.
And then how about the website? Would that be something that we will use to help translate the critical aspects of the processes on the website?
That's right. Yes.
Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
Thank you, Alder. Alder Verveer.
Thank you, Mayor. Hi, Mary Beth.
Hello.
You obviously announced back in August that effective the beginning of September, your office would be closed every day from 1 to 2 o'clock for a daily staff meeting.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm wondering how that's going, not only on your side of things, but our customers' side of the counter and phones, if you will.
It has been incredibly helpful for us to have a time to be able to communicate together, especially being in our temporary space where we can't fit all employees in one space. So a lot of things that we were trying to communicate with each other were falling by the wayside. So it's been very helpful from a perspective of being all on one page and doing our work more effectively. We've been having those meetings in the office so we can still hear if somebody comes up to the counter. And we had chosen a time that is not very busy. And so those who have come to our counter during that 1 to 2 p.m. time frame have mostly been people seeking other city agencies, and the treasurer's office has been able to help redirect them. The only instance I can remember where somebody actually wanted the clerk's office was a former alder who called out till I came to the window during the staff meeting. But other than that, they haven't needed to do business with the city clerk's office.
Well, that's great to hear that it's more of a soft closure, if you will, then if a customer comes to the counter seeking assistance. Does the A team help you during that hour as much, or are they just stretched too thin to ever help during that daily staff meeting?
They are stretched too thin. So prior to closing the office for an hour for a staff meeting, we had a request in for support from the administrative support team to cover an office meeting, and it just wasn't able to work out. So we often would be planning on a meeting, and then we'd have to have one of us covering the counter during the meeting, and it wasn't as effective.
And then lastly, moving forward, it's great to hear that the news about your absentee ballot mailings being much less labor intensive. It always was quite the operation, just watching it from a distance, taking over room 201 of the CCB and so forth. You had mentioned, as you were discussing that earlier, that then that would free up election officials to help staff the phones and so forth during election season. So moving forward, do you plan to have the daily 1 o'clock staff meeting during election season? And at that time, during election season, will you be able to employ election officials to staff the counter and the phones, or would they still go to voicemail and during election season?
Election officials could still help with the phones, but we're not able to get election officials trained in the hundreds of types of licenses that we issue for the city and the county. But we do have a request in with information technology that people would be able to schedule appointments, and that is in the testing phase. So they're testing it out. We had to give them information on all the types of licenses that we process and how long it takes for each of those appointments. And we're just waiting for them to finish testing that software to hopefully make it easier for people to not have to show up at a rush time and then have to wait and keep refeeding their meter as they are waiting for assistance.
You gave a preview to one of the questions I plan to ask Matt Tucker, is how the scheduling for the counter appointments is working with your neighbors downstairs in the basement or lower level, floor 0, whatever we're calling it officially. But anyway, it'll be interesting. So what is your thought on that one? Sorry, I thought I was done with my questioning of you, Mary Beth. Is your thought on that to follow the BI model and make it appointment only, or would the appointments be optional?
No, it wouldn't be quite the BI model. We would still be taking people as they come to the counter, but I'd like to get that data into the system, because I think capturing all of that data could be very helpful in knowing how much time everything is taking and how much of our resources we're devoting to certain things, because then we could maybe become more proactive if certain types of licenses we find take a substantial more amount of time to process. Is there anything we could do on the front end to answer questions before people are paying for parking and are standing at our counter? Is there anything we could help them address in advance and save them time as well?
That makes complete sense. In fact, I have a call today from someone seeking assistance with applications on your website, which is a somewhat regular occurrence when it comes to constituents for, I think, many of us. So thanks for all you do. Appreciate it, Mary Beth. Thank you, Mayor.
Thank you, Alder. I also want to appreciate Mary Beth for prioritizing the efficiency and wellness of her staff by taking time for a full staff meeting. I think it's been really productive and useful, and ultimately will serve our residents really well. Any other questions for the clerk? If not, thank you, Mary Beth.
Thank you.
We'll go on to our employee assistance program. Arlene.
Hi, good morning, everyone. And you can go to the next slide. So this is for our operating budget. So we don't really have any huge changes. We are making some major changes internally. And what those are essentially, we are going to offer some things internally that we usually put out to our external FEI. The first piece is EMDR. So EMDR essentially is a formal trauma-based therapy that we offer employees who experience traumatic incidents in the workplace. And so we actually have someone in our staff who is EMDR certified. And so we have created a module within still the concept of short-term services because we don't have capacity to provide employees with long-term therapy to do that internally. And so pretty much it is only for workplace incidents, and then things that are short-term in nature. For folks who have longer-term needs, we will still support them through community referrals. And I think that it will have really good impacts because it will save us money within our budget, and it also will enhance our participants' experience with our program. In our next slide, I talk about a little bit of the second service. We also did create a facilitator network. And what that is that I have found local providers within the city of Madison to provide some of our debriefing services. As I previously stated, all of those services came from FEI. FEI is a wonderful program. However, they are based out of Milwaukee. And so anytime that they come into Madison to provide us with system services, we have to pay an hourly rate that's a little bit high because they have, admin fees, but we also pay for travel. And so in this little graphic, you will see that, for example, a 90-minute debrief usually will come out to be about $585 through FEI. And through this network, it's actually coming out to be about $225 because we're cutting a little bit of the admin fee as well as the travel fee. I would say in the last couple of weeks, we've used the network about maybe 4 or 5 times just because we needed support, right? And it has gone really well. And so the hope is to keep it small. And if we need to, we can continue expanding who is in that network to just meet the demands of the city. And so that's all I really have for you all. Those are all our biggest changes. Everything else is still remaining the same. Our main goal for the EAP office is just to get back to being a full staff, just with all the retirements that we had. That's all I have for you all. Thank you.
Thank you. Questions for EAP? Seeing none. Thank you, Arlene.
Thank you. Have a great day.
And we'll go on to finance. Dave?
Thank you, Mayor. Hello again, everyone. Pretty much a cost to continue budget for finance. There is basically a technical change with the amount that we have to put into the finance budget that's then used to pay the ambulance billing provider, and that's based on a percentage of the ambulance fee. There is another technical change within the internal audit service to support the cost there through cost allocation rather than the grants fund. And then also in Treasury, just modifying the credit card purchasing fee funding level to support higher usage volumes. That's about $45,000. I list all the current services there. If we can go to the next slide, I'll just kind of array that next to each of the 5 main sections in the department. About 50 positions, with a little less than half of those focused in accounting and payroll and purchasing, followed by budget and program evaluation, which includes the data team. Our newest service, which is internal audit and grants management. And there were a couple of positions authorized in the 2023 budget. One is a grant writer, and we have filled that position, and we're in the process of filling the second position, which is an internal audit specialist. And as you know, we've been talking about that with the Finance Committee about conducting internal audits with city agencies. Risk management area, which includes the administrative support team and the document services team. And then our treasury and revenue management section, which its primary role is the property tax billing process and working with the city assessor on that process, as well as certain licenses and fee collections, and then investing the city's idle cash It also performs that function for the Madison Metropolitan School District. So all of these areas, I think, are facing some workload pressures as the city grows, and as the complexity of our systems increases, particularly with requirements for standards in the accounting area, so lease standards and subscription software standards, and the work associated with that, as well as with our enterprise resource planning system, or MUNIS, which is changed the way we manage those types of systems, and we have more direct interfaces with finance staff and having to manage the work of those systems and project manage module expansions in other agencies. So with that, I'm happy to answer any questions.
Thanks, Dave. Questions for finance? Going once? Going twice? No questions for finance?
Thank you.
So we will go on to IT, and Director Edgerton is here.
Thank you, Mayor. Hello. Good afternoon, Finance Committee and Alders. Next slide, please, Christine. So I am flying solo today. Amanda has a sick kiddo, so it's me. Hopefully I will be able to answer all questions, I think is what the note is on that one. So for information technology, it's cost to continue for 2024. The real big thing is, and I think this is sort of a common theme that you've been hearing this evening so far from our administrative teams, is that workloads are continuing, services are continuing, and it's more difficult to support them with what we have. So we have really been using hourlies as an assistance and a tool for us to support smaller projects. So data, when we're doing large data transfers, we have them help us with data management. When we're doing things with knowledge-based articles, as we are setting up our service center, we had hourlies assisting with that. And then we also have media team hourlies that help with productions. And instead of asking for any money, we decided to reallocate funds that we have, that we were seeing that we were not spending. So in both application and development and technical services, we don't have as many office supplies. We are very much a paperless team. And so we don't have as much paper. We don't have as many printing. We don't use as many pens and notebook for doing our work. And so we were able to pull $5,000 out of there. Our training funds, and that includes our conferences, we do so much more virtually that we are able to reduce that funding as well. And we're still able to keep our staff at the training levels that they need to be in and being able to attend the conferences that they would like. And then we allocated from our other funds count $9,000. So for that, we got $23,000. And with that, we are also doing a program with Centro Hispano. They have a Caminos and Technology program that they are doing, and each of their different sessions that they have, we will be hosting an intern in IT with the hopes that perhaps there will be some opportunities for career paths with those interns. Next slide, please, Christine. Thank you. We do have one supplemental request. It's really in parking utility, the parking division and the Department of Transportation. And I am sure that both Stephanie and Tom will speak to this, but it is to have a project manager that is in IT, but the funding is coming from parking division and DOT's operating budget. And this will be coming in as an ITS specialist too. We already have that model in place. We are doing that with public health and with water utility. So the intent of this position is they are a conduit between IT and parking utility and transportation. They have quite a few technology needs currently, and they are going to have quite a few more increased ones that are going to be kind of complex projects. And to have this position, I think would be very useful for parking division and DOT. And where it will also help IT is that then that frees up other staff to do the other work of supporting all the other agencies and the work and requests that we have from them. And that is all I have, Mayor.
Thank you, Sarah. Questions for IT? Going once, Alder Revere.
Thank you, Mayor. Hi, Sarah, and congratulations on your well-deserved employment contract renewal.
Well, thank you.
So the question I have for you isn't about perhaps a particular project within your agency. It's more about if you could generalize, how long does it take your staff in terms of their workload to process a request that's perhaps somewhat substantive for a fellow agency? So one example would be what Mary Beth just shared with us several minutes ago, requesting the assistance or needing the assistance of IT. And it sounds like your colleagues are working on this to have scheduling software for their office, similar to, I presume, somewhat similar to what BI has. And then another example that our friends from the Office of Business Resources and EDD are well familiar with, and I know they're in this meeting since they're presenting to us yet tonight, is updates needed for Acela, our licensing software, where they continually have shared with me and others that IT's bandwidth is just so tight that it takes almost, I'm exaggerating, I hope, but like months and months and months and months, if not a year, for your team that would do updates to Acela for different licensing products to accomplish something. And then this is a segue to building inspection that is presenting immediately after you. I'm planning to ask Matt Tucker how we can get online, something that I have asked about off and on for many years, the BI enforcement activity available on a public-facing website, similar to public health's availability of their enforcement activities in a very slick website format. So that's my very general question: is does it literally? I know it depends on what the request is, but could it take literally years, or a year if it was any of those examples?
So, and I'm going to answer in very general terms, but without any hesitation. It can sometimes take, a year, depending on the project and the complexity of it. I am going to note that everybody that has presented to you tonight noted IT is working on a project that they're supporting. So that's a real big thing to note. With public health, their website that they are that you're referencing, we help to support that as well. So for I believe it's No Wait Inside is the software that we are working with Mary Beth on, and then we also help set up with building inspection. It's one person, and I am literally slapping myself on the forehead right now. I wish I had provided a slide showing you all of our different teams and then how much staff is with each one, and then like what their project load is. So for 2025, you'll be able to see that. But we have, I believe, I'm trying to remember. I think it's over 240 projects that we are basically working on. Some of them are internal. They're based off of our compliances that we are required to do, and then those of agencies. There are some agencies where they have 15 requests, and these are not just like small requests. These are actual projects. The idea, a project basically is anything that's over 20 hours. And then we have a huge portfolio. If you look at our operating budget, about 49% of our operating budget is actually the software maintenance that we have to maintain. So you can imagine how big that portfolio is of software that we are maintaining on any given day. The Acela team is not a really big team if you consider all of the different things that they support. So they don't only support Acela, they support our telework, they support our financial system, they do the whole back end. Dave's team does the front end and they do the back end. They also support all of our servers, they support all of our databases. So Acela is one small part. They also have one person every day, Monday through Friday, from 8 o'clock till 4:30 that answers phone calls for those who are having problems, our residents and our contractors who are having problems working through the process. They are on the phone with them, working with them as well. That's not done by the agencies, it's done by IT. So there are many different projects and requests for the licensing and permitting system that we have. All of the different ones that you've noted is like 2 or 3 people that have to hit it and have to work on it. And generally they're pretty complex workflows. So if we want to, it depends on which one it is and how long it's going to take. I know that for the one with Office of Business Resources, Matt had stopped and talked to me about it, and I asked the team leader, and he didn't seem to think it was going to be that big of a deal to do that one. That being said, he already has priorities for his teams of we have quite a few legacy systems that we need to get off of, because either the system we are no longer have support for it and we have to get that completed, and or we have other project work that's before that needs to get done. So Ricky, I was just in a meeting with him yesterday, and he said, I cannot commit until March of 2024 because I have that many priority projects that I have before this. So it's where things are in that cycle. But we do know about Matt's, and I'm not really sure if that's in part of his, that needs to be done before March of 2024, or if that's after. And I can ask him and find out for you.
Well, thank you. Yeah, we'll call it the Matt one. it's for the beginning of the street vending season, April 15th. Yeah. The licensing begins months and months before the beginning of the licensing season, which is April 15th, as I say. Mm-hmm. Does Ricky's team include, that's the Acela, et cetera, team? How many of your colleagues generally are in that team?
So Ricky has, and I'm doing a count in my head. So there are 3 to 4 application developers that are working on all of those different systems that I spoke of. And then there are 3 staff members that are supporting all of the databases. And I think we have over 200 some databases that we support. And then also, that's a wrong number, and I'm sure Ricky is wincing right now. And then all of the servers that we have that we still support in the city. So that those 3 are taking care of that.
I see. And then just lastly, make sure I heard what you said, but when I was giving props, if you will, to the cool public health website, and namely the very easy to use search function for licensed establishments, inspections, enforcement, etc. Under the intergovernmental agreement that unified city and county public health departments, IT does support public health completely, correct? Just like the clerk's office does all their licensing for the whole county. And so are the members of your team that developed that public health website, out of curiosity, was that all done in-house, and are they still members of Team City?
So yes, we did have one contractor helping, but we do all of the updating and supporting. So we're, as you were very correct, they had kind of a cafeteria style plan of what they wanted to pick. And so they're county employees, but they did pick city IT to be their support. And so we support all 250 plus employees of public health. And we're the only agency that really does that in the city. And so that's a whole other group of people that we have to take care of. And we have to be, very consciously aware of all of their HIPAA rules and everything else that go along with a public health department. This is why we have a position that public health pays for, but is in IT, is to help with the amazing amount of different systems that they have and then the new systems that they are bringing in. And we support all of those.
Thank you for that reminder. I think that's an important reminder. I don't know that all the members of the council have any, have idea that you also are supporting these county employees, and there are a lot of them in that regard. So thanks for all the background. It's much appreciated, and I know that a lot of interested staff that know the projects I'm referring to are listening. So thanks for that. It's more optimistic than I might have imagined. Thanks again, Sarah. Thank you, Mayor.
Thank you, Alder. Other questions for IT? If not, thank you, Sarah.
Thank you, Mayor.
We are then on to the Planning, Community, and Economic Development agencies, starting with Building Inspection and Director Tucker.
Hi, good evening, alders, mayor, staff, and other interested watchers. I'm happy to kick off the Finance Committee budget presentations for the PC ED agencies like I do every year. Let her be. With me today is Carrie Olson from our support staff. I'm sure you all know what we do, but I'm going to quickly run through our services and highlights. I heard at least 2 questions coming from Alder Revere, so I know we'll have some time at the end to chat. That'll be great. First thing here, our budget is a cost to continue budget, as you know. Talking a little bit about the first slide, our agency mission. Just really summarizing this, we're here to ensure the well-being of the people through ensuring the safety of property. This involves inspecting construction at the time of build, ongoing building and property maintenance, and code enforcement. We're charged with educating the community on the ordinances, and the work involves responding to typical type inquiries from people. We also work to find our customers where they're at in a proactive effort to find partnerships and compliance to the benefit of the city and its people. Our agency overview, we're responsible for permitting, inspections, code enforcement, and consumer protection. We utilize human and technological resources to achieve that goal. We also support efforts to update ordinances, here to meet and maintain the city's community standard. Next slide, please, Christine. So in BI here, we have 43 FTE. Just to run through our services really quick, consumer protection, which is often referred to as weights and measures. This is the group that makes sure the scales are measuring for a pound of food from a store. Scanners are correctly scanning. You get a gallon of gas from a gas pump, the correct dry time when you're drying your laundry at a laundromat. We visit about 1,000 locations, license 20,000-ish devices. Next service, inspection. This is the building plan review and new construction inspection. This is for residential and commercial places. We do permit issuance, which is construction, plumbing, HVAC, and electrical, and we inspect all those permits. The next 2 services, health and welfare and systematic code enforcement, we're in the process of merging into a single. Health and welfare is our property maintenance section. These are the folks that deal with tall grass, dead or dying trees on private property, junk, trash, and debris, snow and ice and excess salt on public sidewalks during the winter, those type of efforts. We have the systematic code enforcement people, who are the folks that inspect rental housing units. And they're also connected to the rent abatement program. And then we have the zoning and sign section, issuing process sign permits, about 600 a year. We go through probably thousands of zoning approvals to keep construction going and do enforcement and follow up on the built environment. You can head to before we get to these slides, I'll just some pictures here show the stuff we do. You can see junk, trash, and debris in the lower left-hand corner, a snow case, some graffiti, weights and measures. We got Terry with a pile of plans burying him, which is how it's been this year, and some construction slides. You can advance to the next one. So just our budget highlights here. We're continuing our fiscal responsibility and how we spend and run the the limited programs that we run, and really to the also our purchase services, thinking very thoughtfully about costs to our agency, to the city, and to our customers. We're continuing to explore online permitting and review to make it easier for our customers to connect with us, so we can get the permitting that is necessary for projects in the city. We're enhancing our code enforcement, usually utilizing field deployed technology. That's an ongoing thing. We're working with our IT department on to just deliver our services better, quicker, and in a more efficient fashion. Finding new ways to educate the availability of our services between outreach to different communities, alders that have been asking us to come to events, upgrades to our website, other methods that we're learning are more ways we can connect with the people we serve. And we're exploring other efficiencies to take care of the people and the property of the city that are touched by our services. And as I note at the bottom here, all this to provide the highest quality service for the common good of our residents and our visitors. And that is all I have for you.
Thank you, Matt. Questions for building inspection? Going once. Alder Revere.
Thank you, Mayor. Hi, Matt. Obviously, I gave you some previews of the areas that I wanted to probe with you. So why don't we start, if you don't mind, with the segue that Sarah provided us. I can't remember when you and I last discussed this, but I certainly remember several conversations with George Hank over the years. And speaking of George, my favorite photo, of course, is the BI class photo that you just shared with us.
We're taking a new one tomorrow morning if anybody wants to see outside of the MMB.
Oh, wow. Well, cool. Well, I have to admit, I very much enjoyed seeing all the old timers, if you will, that sadly are no longer in the MMB, but I had a pleasure and honor of working with in the past. But anyway, so it's kind of a twofold request. One is, and you and I have certainly discussed this, is the fact that the monthly activity reports that each of the 20 alders receive from BI, and perhaps there's other activity reports that others receive that I'm not familiar with, maybe NRTs or whoever. But speaking for the ones that I've received for years and years and years, that's obviously a legacy system, it seems like, because it's been the same format for perhaps 15, 20 years. And so the part one of is that information in many respects seems dated. We just received our September monthly report the end of last week, and I very much appreciate the reports. I read them, every month. But the activity, and I know you receive all of them yourself because you're copied on those monthly emails that each of the 20 alders receives, Matt. But on almost any page of the 4th District one, there's activity that last occurred many years ago, and it just stops for no reason, like city attorney referral, and I'm making this up, but 2020 and no activity since, or complaint and the date of the case was opened and the rest is blank and no further information. So I guess part one of the question is that something that IT is perhaps working on, or is that replacing that legacy system, or is that what I just articulated primarily an internal function where you and your colleagues simply have to perhaps go and look at all these old cases and close them out, or what have you?
Well, it's actually a little bit of both. So I'm glad you brought that up. A few other alders had reached out to me, particularly when you get a new group of alders and they have a fresh set of eyes on a report. You get a lot of inquiries that people that are more used to getting these things, they might not delve in and take a look. And my answer to you is probably best. The response I can give you is it depends. Like, for example, one of the things that we discovered on our earlier reports that were coming out earlier this summer is cases were closing, but they weren't actually closing. So there was a function that kept the case open that we had to work with the IT department to get to auto close cases just in how they were supposed to be closing. So they stayed open and they stayed on the report. I was getting inquiries from alders saying, why is this? This doesn't make any sense. There's no action, and this is nothing. This case is like snow and winter. Why are we talking about it in August or something like that? And so we went through and made that correction, and the reports got significantly shorter, I would say, when all those cases got dumped out in the auto close. Other cases that you might see that have a status of city attorney review or city or something like that, they may be held open because we have an ongoing or continuing prosecution. Poster child for that one, I'll say, is like the building that Pisons was in. Our cases start back in 2017, and we weren't able to get action on that until really 2021-ish, and when we were able to get that one taken care of. If you've seen, the building's down at grade right now, yay. But it took us a long time, even through prosecution, to get some results. What we can do in many cases is just levy for fines and reissue with violations, and that's tends to be what we have to do. But we also go through sometimes those reports, and we find dead cases that should have been closed that weren't. I had a case that was forwarded to me for one of the alders last month. It was for a fence around an above grade pool that was higher than 4 feet above ground, and it never should have been set up by us in the first place, and it had been sitting around since 2021, and the inspector had not auto closed it, so we went in and took care of it. Some of that is just going back and cleaning up. One of the things that my staff though tells me, and I have quite a few newer staff that have been looking at these reports, they kind of think those reports might not be as intuitive or have enough information in them. So we've been thinking about improving them. But first things, we needed to get them kind of cleaned up to where they should be, at least somewhat reflective of where we're at in code enforcement.
Are you in your conversations with, thank you for all that, of course, but in your conversations with IT, Matt, are you, out of curiosity, thinking of an entirely new system, or the current plan is to keep that legacy system and moving forward?
Well, like anything, I think I want to find out from our customers if it's useful and functional and what we can do to give them the best information that they're looking for. I'm not wedded to a format that predates many or all of us just because we have it. What do we need? What's the best way of getting the information? What questions are we trying to answer?
Yeah, thank you. So as you heard me, mention to Sarah, and I appreciate that Sarah's still in the meeting, I see. So she's, I'm sure, listening intently to our colloquy here. The one point that you might not be aware of is the Affordable Housing Action Alliance, in their annual list of budget priorities to policymakers, listed as one of their policy recommendations, increasing accessibility of building code violation data. And so that tenants can have the information about potential defects that are identified in properties that they're considering living in. Correct me if I'm wrong, but since the pandemic, an individual is still able to access the lower level of the MMB and use one data terminal. That's always kind of been there. I always thought of it as an old-fashioned microfiche kind of exercise in a library. But is that, just as a base of understanding here, if someone really was curious and wanted to somewhat easily, I should say, seek out that information, would your staff invite them to come to the MMB and sit or stand at a terminal and look up particular addresses like in the old days pre-pandemic?
Yes, we have a public access terminal that any citizen can come and access. It's frequently used. I don't know about frequently. It's used maybe 3 times a week by people, and we talk to the people that are there also to offer to help explain what they might come across, because some of it is code speak and statuses are not clear. We don't want people leaving with misinformation, but it is public record information that they can access through our office.
And that isn't available online anywhere at this point, or even in public libraries or anything. It's just you have to physically again go to the MMB.
It is not, and I saw that request also, and frankly, I didn't understand it. So I wasn't sure if it meant data on particular buildings or what code violations, common code violations are, so people would have a better understanding. It was unclear what was being suggested in that memo of items.
Well, I think you can easily look to our neighbors to the east, and the one city of a first class under Wisconsin statutes. And if you go to the city of Milwaukee's BI website, you'll see that they have, I won't say, and I mean this in all sincerity, to Sarah and her team at IT, it's not as nice and user-friendly as the public health database search function for licensed establishments and when they were inspected and the results of each of those inspections. But Milwaukee does it. I don't know how long they've done it, but you'll see that you can find everything from the name of the inspector. I don't know if you want to go that far, but the name of the inspector, their contact information, the dates that the case was opened, more or less all the information that we receive or alders are supposed to receive through your monthly reports. So I think that that's what the AHA activists are seeking, is they're familiar that Milwaukee does it. It's helpful to tenants in Milwaukee, and you would think it would be a somewhat low cost, relatively speaking, but a low cost tool to help tenants in our community. So, I don't want to prolong this now, but just encourage you to look at Milwaukee BI's website and similarly Public Health's website here and see how their licensed establishment inspections are easily found. Then, we can take that conversation offline. I don't know if there's anything more you wanted to say on that. Otherwise, I'll move on to the next topic, but ready for the next topic.
Yeah, sure. Thanks for that. I'm happy to take a look at it. I really, like I said, I couldn't understand what the AHA people were getting at, but I thank you for giving that a little more shape. I think I get it.
And I'm happy to set up a meeting with some of the AHA members that are requesting this as well, if that might be of help to you. The other area that I wanted to ask you about, and I realize I'm taking a lot of time here, so thanks everyone, is Vice President Figueroa Cole shared with me the exciting news that programmed inspections are slowly but surely coming back to our community since they were largely banned by the act of the state in 2017, and that there was a recent community meeting in the Allied neighborhood and so forth. The Blake finding study obviously was completed. Can you give us an update, please, Matt, on programmed inspections and the timeline for Allied and beyond that? Obviously, my keen interest in the fact that your predecessor and you have I don't want to put words in your mouth, but more or less promised that the Mifflin neighborhood is a logical next candidate after Allied. So anyway, if you could give us an update on the programmed inspections, that would be great.
Sure. Thank you for that. So for folks that aren't aware of this, this is a new thing that we were looking at under the new state law rubric for reintroducing programmed inspections. We were allocated $20,000 in the 2023 budget to perform a blight study in the area. That study was performed by a consultant in the spring. The results of that were provided to us in a final format in July of this year. We have been strategizing, taking on the effort since we got the report and talked it through with our city attorney staff. The housing and property maintenance supervisor, Jose Maria Donoso, has been leading the effort in that. He's been meeting with his staff to divide up the area, prepare it for assignment for inspectors, which we're hoping to get deployed in the next month or so. We're going to start this effort. We wanted to first meet with the residents, and we would like to have a meeting with property owners. There's a relatively small group of property owners to explain what we'll be doing. We're also using this as an opportunity to educate residents and property owners. Both so property owners can learn about building efficiency programs that are available or will be coming online and available in the very near future to help upgrade their properties. in some cases free money that's out there. And residents, obviously you have a matter of reaching out to people who don't traditionally call us for service. So we've been very thoughtful about how we will be connecting with them, working with the alderperson about how we're going to make those connections. We're currently working with city staff groups about pulling together a sort of like a goodie bag of drop information from city agencies that we'll be taking with us to the inspections. These are people that often are the most challenging to connect with our agencies. And since we're going to have a one-on-one connection with them in their dwellings, we're going to be bringing in communications, call it swag perhaps, other types of things that we can leave to help the people who are there find out what services are available, how they can connect with places like the library or the clerk's office. Or I received a flyer from our human resources department that we're going to slide to these. It's a wonderful opportunity to do that. But as I mentioned, we're very close to deploying on this. Within the next month or so, we have about 600 dwelling units we're going to inspect in about 58 buildings. We're not sure how long it could take. It could take 9 months. It could take 2 years. It's really going to depend on how it goes when we get into the buildings and do our inspection work.
When do you anticipate, assuming that all goes well, Matt, when do you anticipate realistically you might be able to move on to the next neighborhood?
I think we'll be coming to the council next year with probably a budget request for funding for a similar, our next program inspection area. So 2025 budget.
So it would absolutely be premature if we offered a budget amendment to pay, I presume MSA would continue to be our blight study consultant, to pay MSA the $20,000, or I think is what the amendment, was, that we offered at this time a year ago. It would be premature, and there's no way you would be able to get MSA started in the work in 2024 for the next neighborhood.
I don't think so. And talking to Jose Maria, maintaining our normal caseload and then bringing in a programmed inspection effort. We want to see how this one goes. We feel really good that we're going to know more this time next year or sooner, because we'll have been in a lot of the buildings and be making solid progress. But we don't want to commit.
Thank you for the update. I'm excited we finally are.
So are we.
Yes, it's been many years in the making. And then moving quickly here, obviously you had heard me mention to the city clerk that she had almost previewed one of the questions I had planned to ask you, and that is, from your perspective, how is the scheduling for counter appearances going for plan review and zoning? Or is that working well? And is that something that you plan to permanently require, where it's appointment only, or am I misunderstanding that it's not that strict, that it's appointment only?
Yes, you're correct. It's appointment only. I will say that I have explained to the staff that I do feel, even when we deployed this, I had great concerns about limiting the access of the public to us. So we, if we can help someone that may happen to come in, particularly a homeowner, someone who's not experienced with this, we try and help them if we can when they visit. But by and large, we haven't had any real significant problems. I can report that this has turned out to be way more popular than we have ever expected, and it turned out to be a way better tool for delivering the service, particularly the zoning plan review and building code plan review type service than we had ever thought. Just to give you an idea on this, we're prepared for customers when they come in, because we know what they're going to come in to meet with us about. The system has them key in information so we can prepare in advance. We're able to triage the customers in advance, in many cases actually eliminating the need for an appointment, because they might have made an appointment thinking they needed to submit plans. Well, they can actually put it in our Dropbox, either out front on Doty Street or down in our office. We have a Dropbox. They don't need an appointment. Or similarly, they may have made an appointment thinking that they needed to come in and pay for and pull their permit, and they don't need to do that. There's other ways that we have to take care of that. So we've saved a lot of time for our customers there. We also save time for customers because they don't have to wait in line. And they basically know when their appointment is, so they can plan to come in and wait in the office, and there's no one in front of them. Versus in the past, where it was just kind of come in and whoever was there and the numbers were there, you had to wait in line. Sometimes it was, people were not getting served and having to get turned away because it was the end of the day. We're able to coordinate our language assistance well in advance because we can see that an appointment is requested language assistance. That's been extremely helpful. It's also allowed us to structure our time to help staff manage their load. They're able to take time and take appointments away from the calendar so we can do, they can manage the work that they need to do on a daily basis and the staff that are assigned to be working in the office. We're also able to close the counter and coordinate staff meetings, dedicate staff time to plan review when loads get heavy, and for training and in-service. And those of us, we closed our counter once in my career, which was when we moved from the MMB over to 126 South Hamilton for one day. I took my staff out to lunch. It's the only time we've ever had our counter closed. Now we have the ability to just close it, have staff meetings, work, put our heads together, not always have someone that is out having to manage the counter. And that's just been fabulous. It's allowed for us to be able to devote resources kind of where we need to. For example, the plan review staff has some time shut down in the middle of the day so they can make sure that they have just the right number of appointments for lunch for the staff. And zoning, with the significant load that they've been dealing with site plan review, has been closing the counter appointments down on Fridays so they can process site plan reviews to keep really about keeping construction and permitting going. So it's been nothing but a positive for us.
Thank you. That all sounds very great. I appreciate hearing how well it's working, not only for you, but more importantly, our customers. And then lastly, my annual question that you perhaps are anticipating, and that is, if you could just share if we have enough funds in the 2024 budget to fund the graffiti co-payment removal program, something that not that many years ago we ran out of funding for, and I believe Director Wachter had to find other money for us.
Yeah. Yes. I was anticipating this. Thank you.
I knew you were.
And,
I didn't want to disappoint.
Yeah, we do have money remaining in our graffiti copay program this year. We're pushing up to November, December, when we'll stop running that program because you can't really paint anymore. But we're still sitting with a couple $1,000s in that fund. So the way trends have been going this year, we're in good shape on graffiti copay. We do have other monies available, though. If we have a sudden surge and we're running dry, we can transfer over to cover that program. But at this point, it's trending in the direction that we're going to make it with the amount that we have. I was thinking about increasing that. I did not this year in the budget because last year it looked like it was steady. So I think we're okay.
Yeah, and obviously you've always been very conscientious about adhering to your salary savings and so forth. So I know with the 99% budget, it really will be nothing new for you all. But in the 2024 executive budget, it looks like it's, if I'm reading correctly, $6,500 for
Correct.
the program.
Yes. Same as 2023. Yep.
Yeah, exactly. Do you believe that then that's sufficient?
Yeah, yes, I do. I think if it trends like it was this year, we're still sitting with about 2,000 in that account. So yeah, we're in good shape.
Okay, very good. Thanks for all your time, Matt. Appreciate it.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mayor.
Thank you, Alder. Alder Harrington McKinney.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I didn't know if I would be able to unmute myself this time. Great work, Matt, and I was really excited about hearing the forward movement. Thank you, Alder. I do have a question, and could you say a little bit more about the how the ranking of neighborhoods for the blight study, was there an eligibility? Just I want to kind of understand how you got there.
Sure. So what happens in the law is that we need to designate an area, a geographic area, for focus of a program inspection, and in this case, we needed to perform a blight study in that area. This was the first one that we put forth for last year's or this year's budget. Was we were first approached. We were talking with Alder Figueroa Cole about this area. We had discussed it with members of the NRT. We had discussed that we had started a similar project and had the rug pulled out from under us in Allied in 2017 and had to stop it. So it was basically on the list of places that we thought we would be good to start. Other alders, as Alder Verveer mentioned, have talked to me about areas like, say, the greater Mifflin area. You know, there's a few blocks in an area there that are a high concentration of student housing, likely fairly significant concerns about property maintenance. Mifflin Street Block Party balcony collapse may come to mind. Areas that we can be approached on to put on the potential list, and we would talk about how we would tackle that. I mean, it may be possible after we get through this situation with Allied that we can handle a few at the same time. We just need to see kind of how it goes. And we don't have a list. I don't have any kind of list that's floating around my office. More of like, we talk about what's coming next, I think, when the time comes.
Okay, so definitely I'll be talking with you offline, but it does appear that this would be a great opportunity for the city to really focus in those areas. And especially, I'm glad that you mentioned that you're working with the NRT to specifically look at areas within our city that needs that special attention. And so I am following up with Alder Revere's question is that you are not ready to, take on a listing of possibilities until you see the outcome of what's before you now. But that this is definitely something of major concern as we look at the well-being for our city as a whole. So thank you so very much. And I will be talking more through the NRT system.
Thank you.
Thank you, Alder. Any other questions for a building inspection? Matt, I think you might win most popular tonight.
I'm sorry about that. I saw the clock.
That's okay. Nope, happy. This is what it's for. But seeing no other questions for building inspection, thank you very much, Matt. And we will move on to CDA, starting with housing operations. I think we might have Director Wachter here.
Yep, I'm here. So just quickly to go through CDA housing operations. A lot of the changes that you're seeing are an expansion of the Section 8 program as we received more vouchers from the federal government. Also, we're starting to make a transition of units slowly from the public housing program over to Section 8 through repositioning. And part of that is a restructuring of the CDA. So you'll see some additional positions and changes that are happening in the structure of the CDA to handle that. But overall, these are all net neutral to the city budget. This is mostly federal dollars coming in and being redeployed. So that's all I have for housing operations. I can jump to redevelopment or take questions on housing operations if that's easier.
Let's pause and see if there are questions on CDA housing operations. Going once, going twice. No questions on CDA housing, so we'll go on to CDA redevelopment.
All right, CDA redevelopment. A lot of the activity that you see here that's different year over year is that our single family home sales on Allied Drive have ended. So there's not that revenue coming in from sales of properties. Also, one of the things that you'll see is that the CDA owns a number of LLCs for tax credit purposes. The Village on Parks, we use third-party property management. So more of that activity is moved off of the budget you see here and is happening at that level as we directly bill those third-party property managers. And the overall, the staff for CDA redevelopment is largely working on a series of new development projects, the Village on Park, redevelopment of public housing, the redevelopment of Park and Badger. So I can take any questions on that.
Thank you, Matt. Any questions on CDA redevelopment? Going once, going twice. No questions on CDA redevelopment. Thank you again, Matt. And we will go on to the Community Development Division. Director O'Keefe is here.
Such tough acts to follow. Thank you, Mayor. Thank you, members of the committee, members of the council. I'm joined tonight by division colleagues Yolanda Shelton-Morris, Monty Marsh, and Hardy Garrison. Just want to note I'm struggling a bit with a cold and a cough. Not my usual nervous cough. This is the real deal. I've got a brief presentation. I think I can get through it, but my apologies in advance if it's interrupted. I want to begin tonight with just a general comment, especially for newer members of the council, that the Community Development Division's 2024 budget is beginning now to return to a state of some normalcy after the extraordinary events over the past couple of years, prompted, of course, by COVID-19 and especially the federal government's response to it. In the past several years, millions of dollars of federal funds have flowed to the city, primarily from the CARES Act, the American Rescue Plan Act, the Emergency Rental Assistance Program, much of that through CDD, and much of it to help thousands and thousands of Madison residents achieve or maintain some semblance of housing security or get access to basic shelter. But I know you know those are non-recurring funds. When they're gone. And while not completely used up, they are dwindling. And so you're beginning to see a CDD budget and CDD budget totals, which have been stretched in recent years almost beyond recognition, return to levels more closely resembling pre-pandemic levels. So with that, there are three highlights that I want to bring to your attention tonight. First, one area that has benefited tremendously from the influx of federal funds is the support that we've put in place around persons experiencing homelessness. The 2024 executive budget repositions remaining ARPA dollars to continue support for two key elements of that response, namely the temporary men's shelter currently operating at Zaire Road and the campground at Dairy Drive. Specifically, it draws on ARPA funds initially allocated by the council back in 2021 for projects or activities that either were unable to advance, for example, the possible conversion of a hotel to housing, or for which other funds were able to be identified. An example of that, staffing to administer emergency rental assistance funds. The bulk of the funds, about $1.6 million, are needed to sustain the temporary men's shelter. And about $560,000 of ARPA funds will be used in the absence of any other funding source to extend the operation of the Dairy Drive campground into or through next September. And I want to emphasize that point, that the funds contained in this budget and that we have available are sufficient to extend the operation of the Dairy Drive campground through next September, not through the entire year. In addition, by allocating $300,000 of city levy toward shelter operations, the executive budget takes a first step toward recognizing the need for ongoing city funding as the last of the federal dollars that we've relied upon for these past several years are spent. We know, of course, that $300,000 will not replace all of that federal funding. We know that the city will not bear this cost alone, but this is a start. It's an important first step, and we appreciate the mayor taking the initiative to recognize and to make it. Second, the executive budget contains funding that responds favorably to a CDD supplemental request. As you know, the division conducts regular competitive request for proposal processes that are used to allocate funds within program areas that this council over the years has identified as city priorities. These include programs that support work that responds to needs in areas ranging from homeless services to out of school time, youth services, and adult-oriented employment training, youth and adult-oriented employment training, and career development, and more. We don't do these funding processes all at the same time the way that we used to. Instead, we operate now on a cycle that puts funds out to bid within any particular program area about once every 5 years. And these funding processes provide the opportunity, again, about once every 5 years to seek additional funding to help community partners in the affected program areas respond to changing needs and rising costs that they confront. So this year, CDD did request such a funding increase in the 3 program areas slated to undergo funding processes this year. The early child care services, school age child and youth services, and older adult services. And the mayor responded by adding $150,000 across those 3 program areas. That represents a 5% increase to base level funding. Know that was a difficult decision, and so thank her for that show of support. Third and finally, the executive budget reflects $100,000 in funds realized from the previous sale of properties the city owned in the Owl Creek neighborhood. Funds that are to be used to support home ownership education efforts, primarily targeting residents in South Madison. These funds were allocated last year under the Housing Forward RFP process and allocations approved by the Common Council, and this funding recognizes the second year of a 2-year commitment of those funds. So, Mayor, that concludes my overview, and I'm happy to try to respond to questions that members might have.
Thank you, Jim. Questions for CDD? Alder Vitever.
First of all, Jim, I'm sorry you're not feeling well, and thank you for your dedication to being with us when you are under the weather. Just could you give us a sense? I have 2 questions. First is, could you just give us a sense of how you're evaluating the homeownership readiness project? Do we have a sense of how many folks who participate in those educational initiatives go on to acquire loans and be able to become homeowners?
Alder, unfortunately, I can't give you direct answers to either of those questions. This $100,000 is split among 2 different organizations. The Urban League of Greater Madison and an organization by the name of EDO. Sorry that I don't know that acronym, but they're both focused on providing basic home ownership education. So they work with prospective home buyers to repair credit histories or in other ways position households to purchase homes. And then in many cases, again, I'm sorry that I don't have the specifics on this. We probably could get them. But in many cases, these households go on to take advantage of down payment assistance resources that we offer to make those purchases. Now, as you might imagine, we're in a very difficult housing market with very rapidly rising housing costs that have added challenges to any home buyer. And so those conversion rates, I suspect, have fallen off some, but that's the essence of that work.
Okay, thank you. My second question, so I will often hear from friends, constituents about seeing folks who are experiencing homelessness on the street. And so my question is, are we affording sufficient resources to provide enough shelter for the people who need it? And are we seeing that by full shelters, or are we in a situation where we have folks who are outreach to, but for whatever reason are not taking use of the services?
The answer to those questions is yes. We've certainly, I mean, we have come a long ways since the men's shelter in this city operated out of the basement of downtown churches. You've heard this story ad nauseum, but the quality of the shelter space and the support that's offered to persons experiencing homelessness is dramatically better than it has been. I think evidence of that can be found in the utilization rates of shelter facilities. I am frankly quite alarmed at the growing numbers of especially guests at the men's shelter. We are routinely now surpassing the 250 mark. But we have not had to turn men away from the Zaire Road facility. The Salvation Army has not had to turn single women away from the shelter the shelter that they operate on East Washington Avenue. There is some concern about increasing numbers of families that are experiencing homelessness, and there's a lot of attention being paid to them. We're relying on outreach teams to connect with people and put them in touch with resources that are available. And then Alder, for persons who are unable or unwilling to take advantage of shelter services, I'm talking now about adults without children. That was the point of setting up the Dairy Drive campground. It has been fully utilized over the time that it's been open, and continues to be utilized, and we're bringing a lot of support in the form of on-site services to the users of that campground. But these are demands that continue, and if anything are growing. And I don't want to minimize the challenge that we face in coming years as the federal resources that we have relied upon so much to keep these operations going begin to fade away.
Thank you, Alder. Alder Field.
Thank you, Mayor, and thank you, Jim, for being with us here tonight. And I hope you feel better soon. My question is somewhat of a segue from the response to the last question. Does the budget as proposed include any supports, continuing or ongoing operational supports for the Carmenta Family Shelter?
Yes, Alder, there are funding streams that have been established previously that will continue. Some of those are coming from the city, mostly utilizing federal funds, and a good deal of them are coming from Dane County. But yes, there are resources in place to maintain the operation of that shelter.
Okay, I will follow up with you separately to make sure I understand those. Thank you.
Okay.
Thank you, Alder. Alder Evers.
Thank you, Mayor. Hey, Jim, I hope you get over this nasty cold quick soon. Could you talk a little bit, just briefly, about the community services? Maybe Yolanda wants to speak to this. These groups who have received funding, neighborhood centers in particular, that have not seen an increase in roughly 5 years. That in the budget right now, there's a 5% increase. But can you talk a little bit, maybe speaking from their perspective? I would assume they're experiencing increasing costs during that time. Is that a fair assumption?
You know, I think it is, Alder. I think all of our community partners confront those challenges, increasing costs of attracting and retaining quality employees, increasing demands for services. All of those things are challenges that these organizations that we rely on so heavily deal with year in and year out, and it's part of why when we do undertake these funding processes and bring the results to the council, we frequently ask for funding adjustments to recognize and reflect those rising costs. So in this case, we were slated to undertake RFP processes in these 3 program areas. I think they all face the same challenges. We put what we thought was a reasonable request to the mayor in a difficult budget environment. She made that proposal even more reasonable. And again, the 5% funding increase is something that, given the budget environment, that we very much appreciate. I'm sure that the service agencies will as well. It may not be as much as they would like or need, but it's going to be helpful to some degree.
Well, just my comment, if those costs are increasing and they're functioning with the same dollar level, then I would assume their services to our community in some ways are decreasing, that they're perhaps not able to do the same amount of work with those budget constraints. Separate question, and maybe Dave can help clarify for the sake of colleagues. There's some ARPA money that's going to community services, but this is separate then. Is this a way of replacing some general fund expenditures and using up some of the ARPA funds, Dave? I think there's $1.2 million and it's identified as a new program, but it seems like it might be simply carrying on costs that were previously paid for with the general fund.
Alder Evers, that's correct. We're basically trying to use up all of the ARPA dollars by the end of 2024. And so this is seen as the best way to do that. And then that frees up, basically, we didn't have to use as much general fund money. And then we have that money available in 2025, the general fund money.
So we shouldn't think that this new program somehow or another is funding. It's not so much a new program, but it's a way of being able to be efficient and save some of the general fund dollars for other purposes. But we're actually maintaining funding levels for those programs, but just using a different funding source, correct?
That's right. So it's a new program in the sense of using ARPA funding for it. But you're right, it's replacing base general fund dollars, which will come back in 2025.
All right. Thank you very much. Thanks, Mayor.
Thank you, Alder. Other questions for community development? Seeing none. Thank you, Jim, and I hope you feel better. And we'll go on to economic development. And Director Mikolajewski is here.
Good evening, everyone. The Economic Development Division budget this year is pretty simple and straightforward. It's really a continuation of our budget in 2023. We have no staffing or program change proposed for 2024. But what that means is we have a lot of great resources available to continue the work that we have been doing. The operating budget for the Economic Development Division is almost entirely made up of staff salaries and benefits, along with some funding for some other programs and the typical supplies that all of our budgets have. As such, our Office of Business Resources will continue in 2024 to provide the support that they provide to business owners, whether large or small, throughout the community, as well as supporting our great street vending and sidewalk cafe program. And on the real estate side, we'll continue to provide the real estate services that we need as a city to move forward our own projects, as well as real estate work needed to help facilitate private development, in addition to supporting our TIF program and also several of the larger real estate development projects that the city is currently leading. So again, our budget in 2024 provides us with the resources to continue to provide all of those services to the community. In addition to that, some of the funding that is not directly tied to staff includes dollars for our food programming. This is everything from our seed grants to supporting the Double Dollars program, community garden efforts, and the summer meals program in the parks. And we also continue funding for two of our external partners, the Madison Central Business Improvement District, the Downtown BID, and also the Madison Region Economic Partnership, MADREP. That funding is continued at 2023 levels for 2024. And with that, I'm happy to answer questions that you may have.
Thanks, Matt. Are there questions for economic development? Other hours?
Yeah, Matt, can you talk about the hiring of in the real estate division? I don't know, perhaps this goes to the other Matt, but it was either in last year's budget or the one before that. I can't recall, but we put forth a budget amendment that would help the reorganization of the real estate office, and I understand there was some delay in getting that hiring done. Could you update us on that now, please?
Yes, thank you, Alder. By way of background for those that are newer to the council, in the 2023 budget, I should take a step back. The previous Office of Real Estate Services has been without a manager for several years. We had a couple failed attempts at recruiting new staff to that office. As such, in the 2023 budget, the office was split into a new real estate services office and a real estate development office, with the hopes of being able to better attract candidates to fill those manager positions. We are right now in the middle of hiring for those manager positions, and I'm pleased to say that we have candidates that we are currently in negotiations with to fill those two roles. So we should be within the next couple of weeks, I think, making an announcement regarding the new managers for the two new real estate offices.
And the delay in getting those hires does that speak to the challenge in the general labor market, or is there some other explanation?
Yes, the reason that we split the office is that the previous single office really had two very distinct work. So we have our real estate services, which is really focused more on managing city real estate assets, especially within the right-of-way. And then on the real estate development side, we're really focused on supporting real estate development projects, both those being promoted by the city and also private real estate development projects. Those two work products require very different skill sets. And so we felt it was somewhat awkward having a single office and a single manager expected to manage both of those skill sets and also manage a rather large team of 11 individuals. And so we felt that by splitting the office, we would have greater success at identifying managers that can step into those roles that are a little more focused. And I think that is bearing out now as we are moving through and making offers for those positions.
All right. Well, I may talk with you offline about that. I'm still curious, just the long delay in being able to hire these folks and finish the rework, but we could talk later about it. Thanks very much. Thanks, Mayor.
Thank you, Alder. Alder Wheeler.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Thank you, Matt. My question is along line with the salaries. So I see that from 2022 to 2023, there has been a lot of increase. And, what you are requesting now is almost like more. Is it reflecting on the new position that you're talking about, or just walk us through about the salary wise so much increase?
Sure. Some of that salary increase is due to the fact that we split what was previously a single manager into now two managers, although we did take some funding from a vacant real estate position to help with that. So that is not an entire explanation of that. Since 2020, though, certainly a large part of that increase has to do with the fact that city staff are receiving pay increases. I should say general staff, which is what ED staff is. We went a few years without a significant increase, and we now in the 24 budget there was a proposed increase, and also we're seeing an increase in 2023. So that some of that is just across the board with all general city employees.
Thank you. Thanks, Madam Mayor.
Thank you, Alder. Any other questions for economic development? Seeing none. Thank you, Matt.
Thank you, everyone. Have a good night.
We'll go on to planning and Director Stouter.
Thank you, Mayor. Thank you, Finance Committee. I'm Heather Stouter with the Planning Division, and like you've heard many times now this evening, our 2024 operating budget is similar in that it is basically a cost to continue budget. And I'll share some of the highlights and then a few things that deviate from previous years. So overall, we're about at $5.4 million, and that does include a $1.5 million federal grant to support our metropolitan planning organization, which I'll talk about here in a second. We are maintaining current staffing levels within the executive operating budget. And I'm going to talk just briefly about our three service areas. First of all, our comprehensive planning and development review service. This is actually two different services, to tell you the truth, but in the budget, it really represents our work on the comprehensive plan, sub-area planning, data and mapping, as well as development review. And so in the coming year, we anticipate continuing with our new planning framework, taking on, we're in the midst of two plans now in the northeast and west portions of the city, and we intend to take on the southeast and southwest area plans in 2024. Continue with our citywide data and mapping effort that's really part of a larger interagency project to make sure that we're getting good information out there to decision makers and the public. And then finally, continuing to support the rapid pace of development and redevelopment in the city. Next slide. Our second service is the Metropolitan Planning Organization, and this is a separate group, not working within the Madison Municipal Building, but on State Street. It's a group of professional transportation planners charged with regional transportation planning. Every major city across the country has an MPO, and ours happens to be formally housed within the city of Madison, but does provide regional transportation planning for almost the entire Dane County region. Importantly, we did have a supplemental request for the MPO, and that is something that the mayor has included in her budget, and that's an up to $30,000 supplement, which could leverage another $120,000 in federal funds. And so what's happening here is that each year, the federal government is allocating a certain amount of money to MPOs across the country. We anticipate getting the opportunity for $120,000 extra dollars in federal funding, but we need to match that at 20%. Our new Greater Madison MPO manager is working hard to get local match from other municipalities, cities, villages, towns, and in the county as well. And if those other local matches are secured, that supplemental $30,000 can be decreased. The main reason we want to make sure we can leverage the maximum amount of federal funds possible is to really support the regional transportation plan effort that will take off in 2024. And specifically, we'd like to engage a consultant to help broaden our public engagement within that effort. Next slide. Our final service, neighborhood planning, preservation, and design. Wanted to mention a few highlights from the executive budget. First of all, $30,000 is included as needed for, some of you may have heard, the State Street experiment, an experimental closure of the 400 through 600 blocks of State Street. And we may need additional funds beyond what tax increment financing can provide to support things like planters, temporary benches, programming along those 3 blocks, et cetera. And so the mayor has generously included up to $30,000 for that experiment in 2024. And also sustaining the current levels for our art grants and other operating budget municipal art programs. And then as well, the neighborhood grants at $30,000 and placemaking funds at $7,000. Thanks so much. Happy to take any questions you might have.
Thanks, Heather. Questions for planning? Going once, going twice, and you're off the hook. So we will go to the Office of the Director. And
I think I'm filling in.
I think that might be you filling in for Matt.
Yes. Yes, happy to do that. So for the Planning, Community, and Economic Development Office of the Director, I want to highlight one exciting change in that a part-time graphics tech position within the Office of the Director has been moved forward by the mayor as an increase to a full-time employee. And I think that this position has really helped throughout PCED, and I can speak from experience within the planning division to be able to work collaboratively with the person in this graphic design position has really helped us to extend our reach and to look at our materials, presentations, documents in a fresh way, and get the support that we need to put out materials that look nice and accessible to Madison residents. So that's just the major change within the Office of the Director. Any questions on that? I will do my best.
Questions on the Office of the Director? If not, thank you, Heather.
Sure.
And that gets us through PCED and on to transportation. We will start with Metro. And it looks like our general manager is here.
All right. Good evening, everyone. So Metro's budget for next year does have some changes. The largest of which is an increase in a lot of our partner services. So for those of you who aren't aware, Metro obviously is a city department, but we operate contractual service with 9 different partner entities, including UW and the surrounding communities. We continue to see strong demand for growth in those services in our partner jurisdictions. And so that's showing up next year as increased revenue of about $1.9 million. We also are seeing an increase in fare revenue, fare and advertising revenue for next year, generally around the increased demand for service. So far this year, we're up about 15% in our ridership as we continue to kind of march back towards our pre-COVID norms. And so we expect that progression to continue going forward. Additional costs for next year, it's about $1.6 million. That includes 6 positions, 2 positions in what we call our service lane. So that's the folks that fuel and wash our buses each evening. We continue to see high rates of overtime in the service lane, and so we're adding 2 positions there just to reduce overtime. We are also opening our Hanson Road facility next year, and I'll get into that a little bit more here in a minute. And then we're expecting to see an increase in paratransit services or paratransit costs due to a new vendor contract that went into place, as well as continued high demand and including demand in our partner jurisdictions. Sun Prairie, for example, just added paratransit service for the first time in June. And for those of you who aren't familiar, paratransits are door-to-door service for people with disabilities. We are expecting an increase in our fuel and utilities costs to reflect the increase in the opening of our Hanson Road facility, as well as the additional miles of more service. And then we're expecting to see and Christine, I don't know, I think my slides might be, may have skipped the first one. There you go. Sorry, I threw me off there for a minute. So yeah, as I was saying, so one of our big changes is opening the Hanson Road satellite facility in 2024. So this facility has been a major priority of Metro for a long time, well before I got here, mainly because our existing facility on Ingersoll is dramatically over capacity. It was originally designed in the 1980s for 160 buses, and we at one point had 215 buses here. So, I mean, literally buses just parking in the parking lot, on the street, like just very much over capacity, and that created for a long time a big impediment to growth and meeting the demand, especially from our partners, of increased services. We purchased the former FedEx site on Hanson Road in 2021, and the renovation project to make that a fully functional facility for us is out to bid right now and should be done by the end of next year. And again, that allows us to continue the growth to meet our demand from partners. And specifically, those partners are increasing service, as I mentioned. We need to increase our staffing to support that service. And that increase in service is funding the additional positions. It's not necessarily coming from the Madison subsidy. But these agreements are very complex. We've had a lot of discussions recently around how do we make these partner agreements and our regional vision sustainable well into the future. And so that's something we continue to work on. Go to the next slide. And then, as I mentioned, specifically those increase in revenues of about 2.2 million, and then the 1.6 million increase in costs, including the 6 positions for the service lane to reduce overtime, the Hanson Road facility opening, and then 1 position to support our transition to electric buses and managing our charging infrastructure. Increase in our paratransit costs, again, due to a new vendor contract and new services as in Sun Prairie. Fuel and utility costs of a new facility and additional miles. And then the last thing is a cost share of a position in traffic engineering, which Yang will talk about a bit, but we'll be implementing a traffic signal priority system in 2024 as part of our bus rapid transit project. Those systems have the potential to have a huge benefit for us in terms of getting the buses through signals more quickly and reducing delay and dwell times, which ultimately can save us a lot of money. But it's not a system where you can just set it and forget it. It requires constant oversight and maintenance and adjustment. And so this would be a position that we would share with traffic engineering for that purpose. So, and again, there's plenty more detail I'm happy to dive into if you have questions, but for now, I'll leave it there.
Thank you, Justin. Questions for Metro? Alder Vitiver.
Thanks, Justin. Can you tell us about how things work with our surrounding areas? So, like, I guess I'm struggling to understand why we have an increase in our budget for paratransit services to Sun Prairie and why they're not paying for it. So, like, I'm trying to figure out, am I misreading it, or is there something else there?
Yeah, no, they are paying it, but we are because Metro is a City of Madison entity, we need to budget for both revenues and costs. And so that's why you see, actually, we're bringing in more revenues than we're increasing in cost over cost to continue, but we need to account for both in our budget.
Thank you, Alder.
Alder Curry, I'm going to call on Alder Wahilihi, and then if you'd take the chair, please. Alder Wahilihi.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Thank you, Justin. In your budget, could you please talk about if there are any federal funding that has been in place and if they are expiring 2024 or 2023 end, and if some of those work has been done or completed?
Sure. So we are a direct recipient of federal money, and we have a lot of various federal pots of money for which to draw on, most of which is capital only. So we've historically and plan to in the future use a small portion of our federal funds on what's called preventative maintenance of capital assets. So it's kind of a gray area where the feds allow us to use capital dollars to maintain capital equipment, even though we normally consider that an operating expense. So our maintenance department is essentially federally funded. For the last couple years, the last 3 years or so, we've also been able to tap into federal COVID relief money that has come directly to us through the Federal Transit Administration. Those dollars have been able to be used on operating directly, but we expect to fully expend those dollars by the end of this year, so by the end of 2023. So starting with this 2024 budget, we'll be back to kind of our normal status, which is federal money in our operating budget is limited just to our maintenance department.
Thank you. And some of the fundings for the work that you were supposed to do, have you finished, or you may have requested for extension to complete the work that was tied to the budget or fundings for the federal?
Are you talking about capital projects?
Yeah, capital projects, yes.
Okay. So that's not included here in the operating budget. They are included in our capital budgets, but we've got various projects underway with federal funding, including the bus rapid transit. Obviously, the construction of the Hanson Road facility is federally funded. That, as I mentioned, is out to bid right now. Our technology upgrade project is planned to be complete at the end of next year. That's also federally funded. Our fare collection system, also federally funded, planned to be complete next year. And I'm sure we just earlier this summer received another $38 million for bus replacement, electric bus replacement, and charging and solar installation on our facilities. That will likely take a couple more years to complete. Probably 2026 before that's complete. But we should have the buses next year. So yeah, a long list of things that are federally funded on the capital side that we continue to work through. Those are all, moving ahead. They're all generally on schedule and on budget. So, all is moving forward, but certainly a lot of moving pieces there.
Thank you, Justin. I may have more questions, but I'll reach out offline. Thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you, Alder. Are there any other questions for Metro? Seeing none. Thank you, Justin.
Thank you.
We'll go on to parking. It looks like Director Cox is here.
Good evening, everyone. Enforcement during the fall, winter months to help during alternate side parking and snow emergency. Historically, we've struggled to staff during those times, so having a full-time position would really help us. We're also requesting the PIO position to transfer out of the parking division budget and into under the Department of Transportation budget. So the PIO position would provide support to transportation, traffic engineering, and parking division. we have a vacant GIS coordinator position, so we will recreate that position to the IT specialist 2 position that Sarah had mentioned earlier. That will be shared with transportation, traffic engineering, and parking. That is one that I'm very excited to have as we review all of our current software systems and realize that we really need to improve those and to get the support we need to make that happen. So we will have a decrease in our charge revenues with the Lake Street garage closure. We're looking at a $1.6 million decrease in revenue. For those of you that know the Lake Francis Street garages, they're heavily used. So with that closure, we will see a loss in revenue. We are very close to hopefully increasing the city towing fee. If you remember, we did sign into a new contract and the tow fee increased that the city pays in the contract, but it didn't increase to what we charge the vehicle owner. So we're trying to make it more in line with what the actual costs are. Included in that, we are hoping that the difference between the current fee and the increase, those revenues will come back to the parking division fund. Currently, they all go into the general fund, but the towing contract is paid out of the parking division fund. So we would get some of that money back. And then we are looking to utilize $4.8 million in parking reserves as revenues continue to remain below pre-pandemic levels. And also with the closure of the State Street garage and the Brayton lot that closed. Next slide. So this is just kind of a snapshot of where we are currently through August, just looking at 2022 versus 2023 revenues. So we have seen an increase, which is good, where we have about 900,000 increase from 2022 at this time. There are a couple months where it did drop a little bit this year. We're trying to determine what caused those to drop, especially in August, which is a pretty popular season for us with residential permits and monthly parking. One of the things that we will be doing in 24 is reviewing all of our current rates, fees for both on and off street parking. We will likely start with off street parking first. The last time these rates were reviewed, it appears was in 2018. I would really like to make this more of an annual process as we examine them throughout the year, look at trends, and make sure that we're covering our operating costs and just looking at what the demand is. And then we will also be reviewing our on-street parking. One thing I'm very interested in is just taking a full overview of what on-street parking looks like with metered parking. Are there other ways to do it? Are there changes that we can make that make it more user-friendly? Maybe anything from extending hours, days, rates, changing ordinances, just the whole thing. I would like to kind of revamp our on-street parking to make it so it's more customer friendly. And then the 2024 projected revenue loss, I just wanted to point out that we do have that loss with the closure of Lake Street Garage and Brayton Lot. The total is about 1.9 million that will see a decrease in revenues. That is all.
Thank you, Stephanie. Questions for parking?
Alder Evers?
Yeah, Stephanie, thank you. Could you speak a little bit about, excuse me, this shared park ranger parking person? Does that mean that this person in the summertime would help with parking challenges within the parks? And like at the zoo, at Henry Viola Zoo, we've had issues with people parking on the grass there on busy days. At Brittingham Park, we've had issues with people parking on the bike path. And this stresses out park rangers because they're somewhat understaffed to be able to deal with this. Is the assumption here that this position will help deal with the parking challenges within the parks themselves?
It's my understanding they'll do all park ranger duties. I will say, in my previous role as the parking enforcement supervisor, we did work very closely with the Parks Department. So when they were stretched for resources with parks rangers, parking enforcement can also come in and enforce on the parking issues in the parks. So I think we'll be able to work a little more collaboratively with this, where we can identify the areas where maybe parking enforcement staff can assist, so park rangers can address other issues that are happening in the parks. Then police don't have to be called to address those lower level issues because the park rangers can help with that. But yeah, during the summer months, they would be able to help with parking, but I believe they have other duties as well that they'll be doing.
Well, I just want to say I welcome this, if it will help deal with these challenges, because it does create real problems in our parks when, and sometimes they're simply overcrowded and the parking lots are full. But without any kind of supervision, folks will take advantage of that and park on the grass, park in areas they're not supposed to be on, bike paths, things like that, which ends up diminishing the value of the parks for other people who are using it and enjoying them. So thank you. I appreciate this. And thanks for thinking of this. That's all, Mayor. Thanks.
Thank you, Alder. Alder Vitever?
So can you remind us how long the State Street ramp will be closed? And so then how much, I know it's 1.9 million in lost revenue for 24, but then how many years does that go for, and how much is the total loss in revenue? And then I remember that we do have some thing that we're putting in place to compensate for the loss of that garage, but I can't remember off the top of my head what it is.
Sure. So the garage is expected to close the beginning of 24. So I believe January of 24. It will not reopen until 2026. So we're looking at approximately 2 years of revenue loss with that garage. We will be receiving some air rights payments with that garage. But they'll be broken out over the next 3 years. So we will be receiving, I think it's 18 million in air rights payments. One of the other things that I'm looking at with these rate increases is with that garage closing, the demand that we will have on the Francis side of that garage. And we'll have to make adjustments to our operations over there and our monthly parking, what's open to the public, and look at our rates to kind of help support the offset.
And then I know we talked earlier in the year about issues with the RP3 program, and I very much am in favor of trying to do sort of a whole revamp. Can you just share with the rest of the group about kind of some of the things we talked about what IT updates you will need in order to be able to accomplish that?
Sure. So we are trying to improve our residential permit parking program. We are looking at the costs associated with it, making sure that we're covering the true costs of the program, including the enforcement costs, the administrative costs. We're also exploring what other cities are doing across the country with that program. Ours has been historically set up to around the start of the school year, and that creates a huge rush at one time of the year and puts a lot of demand on staff. So we've been looking at can we break that out over the year where maybe permanent residents can renew at a different time, or the permit is more than a year, maybe it's 2 years. So we're looking at seeing what options we have available. If there needs to be a fee increase, what that might look like. And do we have a system an online system that's user friendly for the customers, and so it makes it easier for them to apply for the permits.
Alder Rummel?
Thank you, Mayor. And I'm bringing this question up. It's maybe not so much for Stephanie as for the mayor or sort of the bigger, all the kind of other agencies. But I've been thinking a lot about the PIO, proposal in the mayor's budget. And I spent way too many hours one night looking for all the PIO positions in the operating budget. And there are approximately 7. And I believe there may be some vacancies, but someone can tell me if I'm wrong. And it just honestly seems kind of random and uneven, which might be a reason to consolidate in the mayor's office. I haven't really decided yet, but I'm wondering what would be a process to get a good report on how this POs run? Because like some, you could go on like the web page of, say, fire, and there's a little tab that says media. But if you went on community development's page, you would not find out who the PIO is. And there's 2 in that department, and I could only figure out one via reading news releases for 6 months. So like, who would you call if you wanted to find out the news from? Anyway, so you get what I'm saying. It seems really uneven. And how, like when I think about the budget, and maybe I'm giving my opinion and not asking a question, I apologize, but I just thought I would do this while I'm thinking about it. When we look at the categories of the functions in our budget, I'm wondering if any way that we can organize the PIOs to be like public health and safety or public works, PSED, transportation, because some agencies have like every piece of it has a PIO and others have none. So anyway, I'll stop, and maybe the mayor can, and I appreciate you sending out the NRT language, because I went looking for that and I didn't find it very easily. So I appreciate that. So maybe it's a question for the mayor, and maybe not. I don't mean to put Stephanie's item on the spot, and I appreciate all your help in the district. Thank you. But I'll stop. Thank you.
Yeah, thanks, Alder. I think it is not a question for Stephanie, except I will say that I very much appreciate Stephanie's generosity to her sister transportation agencies in being willing to share the PIO position for the good of the whole there. I actually, Alder, don't think there's any area where every agency in it has a PIO. And in fact, I think that there may only be 3 full-time PIOs. Most of the PIO positions have other duties. And so while I tend to agree with you that it would make sense to try and rationalize the overall communication structure and, have some parity, have, PCED, have a PIO. By the way, that position is vacant. And have Public Works have one. Anyway, like that, right? But because of the other duties, the part-time nature of the communications duties for many of these folks, it's not that simple. I think that in transportation, we benefit from it being a vacant position, and which then you can move. Similarly, we recently did that in PCED, where we decided to have it be for the entire department. But I think it's just not quite that straightforward in other cases. And to me, that actually is one of the stronger arguments for having a citywide person who can both fill in some of the gaps
for agencies that don't have a PIO, and thus we don't hear from very often and don't have the capacity to communicate well with our constituents, or put out press releases or have events, or all the things that a good PIO does, without having to hire somebody in each and every one of those departments, but also to have somebody who can be thinking about the whole and can be thinking about how the PIOs cooperate, how they collaborate, bringing some order to that. I will say that since the pandemic, at least, the PIOs meet on a somewhat regular basis to, at a minimum, share what they're each working on. But to me, that's sort of the base level of collaboration that we should be looking for. And I would hope that a citywide position would be able to bring a higher level of collaboration between both PIOs and our agencies overall in terms of communication, and some of the things that we've already talked about tonight. For example, really thinking about language access and thinking about what materials are getting translated and what the various priorities are for those, since we know that we have a limited translation budget in civil rights. And I think somebody who was really looking at the whole and thinking about communications on the whole citywide level would be able to think about those priorities, and help us really make progress on our language access plan. I think, we heard earlier about the building inspection plan to do program inspections in the Allied Drive neighborhood, and Matt mentioned briefly that they are assembling swag bags, or leave behinds for folks. And I can tell you that there's been a handful of examples recently where we've thought, gosh, we really would we have an opportunity to be in touch with folks in the community, and we really need some, we'd like to tell them about more than just one thing, but there's nobody that has that organized. And so we find ourselves going, department by department by department. Do you have anything? Do you have anything? Do you have anything? Whereas a citywide PIO could have that all assembled already and know where the files are and know how you get them printed, and be able to say, you have an event, great, I will make you stacks of these things so that you can go to this event. You, water utility, just for example, can go to this event and take information about the MadCap program, but also take information about how people can get registered to vote or how they can get their library card. And that can happen, that collaboration can happen without somebody, but I'll tell you, it's not happening right now. And it takes extra effort to make that happen without it being somebody's job. And so I really do think that having that centralized position will be a benefit. And I think it'll be a benefit to the other PIOs. And I think it'll be a benefit to the city in the long term, because I do think, yes, if we have somebody who's paying attention to our communication structure overall, they will be able to help us develop into the more equitable structure that we ought to have. What we have has just developed haphazardly, right? As agencies have felt it was important to invest in communications. And not every agency has been able to do that. And I think if we have somebody who's paying attention to that structure overall, we can build out a vision, and then we can start to invest into it. And that's a multi-year project. But I don't think we get there without somebody paying attention to what that structure should look like in the first place. So, sorry, you did ask. Those are my thoughts.
Thank you. I appreciate it. I do have one follow-up thing with my poking, my late night poking, is I think yesterday, I don't know, probably Alder Revere, and one of his many questions, talked about some of the wage discrepancies, and it was maybe explained that some of that was, the add-ons of benefits and other parts of the costing for salaries, or at least that's what I heard. But when I look at all these PO positions, there's some real increases in some of the salaries, and maybe I'm reading it wrong, but it looks like if we approved all the ones, we'd spend almost like 900,000 and change for PIOs. Just maybe that's not a lot of money in the scheme of things, and maybe I read it wrong, but I'm just curious that some went up the way the salary went up $20,000, $30,000, and so people should look at that and maybe help me understand what I'm missing.
Alder, I don't think you're reading that right. We've, as far as I'm aware, and finance staff can correct me, we've not increased. I mean, I don't think any of the PIOs are getting an increase other than what other staff are getting.
Okay, it doesn't look like that, but I will check in with the finance. Thank you.
Yeah, I don't think that's correct. We don't have enough PIOs to get to that number. Right. Alder Verveer, questions for parking?
Yes, thank you, Mayor. Back to the parking division. Hi, Stephanie. Thanks for your presentation. I wanted to begin with the kind of broad view. Can you share with us approximately what the current PU fund balance is as we continue since the pandemic to draw down millions of dollars each year?
Yeah, so at the end of this year will be roughly around 13 million.
13 million. And that does or does not include the payment for from Mortensen for the air rights for Lake Street?
That does not include it.
Does not. Okay, thank you. I next wanted to turn to the issue, and you mentioned it certainly, of alternate side parking, snow emergency zone parking enforcement, and perhaps the lack thereof since the pandemic. And obviously you have tremendous personal experience having managed the parking enforcement operation for so many years in the police department. Correct me if I'm wrong, Stephanie, and we don't have to go back to the really dark days of the pandemic, but just last winter, I think at best you were only able to, well, it wasn't you. I guess it was you. Well, I don't know, with all your different promotions, like going to Sales Street. I can't remember when you went to Sales Street, went to MMB and so forth from the CCB ground floor. But anyway, last winter, and I think it was you and Amy O'Rourke that would have been doing this last winter. Am I correct that in my recollection that we were only able to have 2 or at best 3 PEOs working on a night of a declared snow emergency?
Yeah, our numbers were very low this past season. We had a staffing shortage. So when you mix the staffing shortage in with the winter months, it became very hard to staff, to get them to pick up overtime, which is one of the reasons why we really want to move to this overnight full-time 24-hour operation, because we will have staff permanently on to provide that service. So we have been doing a lot of hiring this year. I believe we were down 5 positions. So hopefully this year looks a lot better. We will have the permanent staff on, but we will also have staff come in on overtime for those larger snow emergencies.
Will we go back to the days of having the hourly winter PEOs like we had historically?
No, our goal is to move away from hourly positions. They were a struggle for years to fill and retain staff. We were lucky to end this. We had 11 positions that allocated that we could fill. We were lucky to have probably 5 remaining, maybe at the end of the season. So we're looking to try to, well, especially as we move out of the police department, we won't have that overnight support. So we're looking to have parking enforcement staff on during the overnight hours. And there is enough work for full-time staff during the overnight hours. I think a lot of it had been missed over the years because we just didn't have anybody out there. So we would like to use more full-time staff. And we're also looking, I mean, every year parking enforcement looks at their operations and their staffing levels and makes adjustments. So if we need to move staff to overnight instead of the early morning shift, we can make those adjustments.
Thank you. In your budget, and it wasn't called out in your presentation or in the budget highlights, but if I'm reading your position summary correctly, or salary detail, whatever you want to call it, am I correct that you, in this executive operating budget, are adding not only the additional joint PEO with the Parks Division as a ranger program, but also another PEO and an additional PEO lead worker position? Am I reading that right?
That was in 2023's budget. So that was for this year. We added those positions.
And that was part of the budget process a year ago?
Yes.
Okay. So the only additional PEO that you would have is the winter one.
Yeah. Yes.
Proposal.
The shared one. Mm-hmm.
Okay. So how many nightside PEOs do you plan to have this winter in comparison to what you've been able to do recently? Obviously, as you're well aware, because we talk over the winter and have email correspondence, me and Brian Johnson, the lack of enforcement has been quite noticeable, to say the least, in the downtown area in terms of any sort of compliance with the snow emergency zone has been very poor, sadly. And then, anecdotally, there's been very little enforcement. So for this winter, with the additional position, and then what you've already been working toward since last winter, how many positions do you think you generally have on a alternate site parking night after November 15th versus a snow emergency declaration night?
So we will have, starting this winter season, we will have the 2 positions plus the lead worker, so 3 total that were in the 23 budget. So they are just finishing up training, and they will be working this winter. So they will be on for a regular alternate side. And then during snow emergencies, we will have those 3, plus we will have anywhere up to, sometimes we've had up to 8 staff in to help with the snow emergency. The snow emergency is tricky. It always depends if we're going to do the towing operation or just a general plow. That depends, that's what guides us on how many staff do we actually need, because we only get so many tow trucks to tow vehicles during that time. So we try to get as many staff as we can get in for the larger snow events. And I'm hoping, with being fully staffed now and having new personnel, we will have people more excited about overtime opportunities.
Yeah. Is your overtime budget, though, looks like it's the same as current year, correct?
Mm-hmm. Yes.
Yeah. I'm sorry to go back to to try to figure out my confusion about the position summary, but I'm looking at page 375 of the executive operating budget for this year. And it says in the 2023 adopted budget was 1 parking enforcement lead worker. And then for 2024, the request is 2. And then similarly for PEO, it's 28 FTEs in the adopted 23 budget and 30 in the 24 request and executive budget. Perhaps Ryan or Christine could pop in and explain it. Ryan, thanks for turning your computer on.
No problem.
My confusion, please.
Yeah, I think the confusion. So if you're looking in that 23 budget column for positions, those positions that were created in 23 are showing up in a new position classification. So they're not actually it's just a kind of a nuanced thing with the data in the budget data. So those new positions that were created, they're showing up, and you'll see it kind of middle of the list. There were 4 new positions created in in 23, and that's where those ones Stephanie referenced are showing up as. So they're not on the same line as the other PEO positions.
So what line are they for 23 adopted?
If you see, they're in alphabetical order, so it's in that new position classification. That's kind of in the middle of the list there below maintenance.
Oh yes, new position 4. Why did we do it that way? You didn't need an HR position study for these.
That's a good question. It may have just been we were short staffed with the budget team last year. It may have just been getting things in the data to get the book pages generated. Yeah.
Okay. All right. Well, thanks so much for explaining that. That certainly clarifies things very well. Appreciate that. So, Stephanie, speaking of towing, why don't I pivot to the obvious issue of the towing fee and Schmidt's current contract? Again, a conversation you and I have had in this forum and offline. As you know, I'm ready, willing, and able to sponsor the ordinance amendment for you. And the executive operating budget is clear, as you explained in your presentation, about the anticipated revenue not going to the general fund, but rather to the parking utility for that, what I understand to be incremental increase in towing fees. But I couldn't find either in your agency request or in the operating budget exactly how that would break down. Can you just maybe start over and explain the approach? And I know you went through an equity analysis and so forth, and we've been very thoughtful about this. And since the contract was adopted by the council a long time ago now.
Sure. So we will hopefully the goal is to increase it to cover the costs that we are being charged by Schmidt's. And the difference between the $65 and the increase, that revenue will go into the parking division budget. So the $65 will continue to go into the general fund, but the difference will go into the parking division fund. And then
your division is the one paying Schmidt's.
Correct.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah.
And then, what I'd like to do with that ordinance is create it so we are not discussing this in 5 years again on how to catch up. So create it in a way that will have incremental increases. And we're still exploring that. I'm hoping to have something done soon where we will have increases so we can kind of stay ahead of the game, if you will. Did that answer your question? I think I missed a part of your question.
Yeah, so the main part, and I'm sorry, I'm not being very, I think, clear. The main part of it is what does the assumed revenue get us in terms of, what we've been losing every single tow? When you said, or maybe it was my words, not yours, but that we would incrementally get back up to what we have been historically year for years covering our costs with Schmidt's. Does this executive operating budget assume that our costs will be ultimately fully covered in 2024, or how incremental were you thinking?
I'm sorry. Yes. So we've looked at a couple different options. We did look at an incremental increase. We also looked at just having an increase, a one-time increase, get us to the current cost. So if we go with the one-time increase, then we would be whole, and it would cover the costs starting in 24. And then from there, we would look at looking at increases every couple of years. We're still figuring out what that might look like.
Okay. All right. So I'm sorry if I'm belaboring the point here. So the $165,000 of what's called incremental revenue in the budget highlight, that is in essence pulling off the Band-Aid and no longer in 2024 losing money to Schmitz, even though we have the word incremental in the highlight?
Yes.
Okay. So as of tonight, your thought is that in a council meeting, hopefully sooner rather than later, we would introduce an ordinance amendment that would just cover the whole cost and do so moving forward unless amended in the future by ordinance. So we wouldn't, again, as you say, have to worry about this and losing as much money as we have.
Yes.
With the current contract. Okay. Perfect. Thank you. I'm again very happy to sponsor that whenever you and the city attorney's office are ready.
Thank you.
The last thing I just wanted to ask you, not that everything hasn't been parochial here with your division impacting the core downtown so much, so substantially, is something that we talk about at our downtown coordinating committee meetings almost every month, that I hope you've heard word from our discussions. But as we talk about the 400 through 600 block State Street experiment that planning Division Director Stouter mentioned in her presentation tonight, we've had on the books for over 20 years now that ordinance that no loading or unloading is allowed on State Street proper from 11:30 a.m. to 1:30 p.m. And then with the pandemic, the PEOs, and I'm not saying this was wrong, but obviously became more forgiving, and we were in the midst of a really dark time, and those businesses all were certainly. Can we go back to the good old days of actually enforcing that? Now, it might seem odd since we've been talking mostly about winter with me the last several minutes, but the idea behind that ordinance, which I sponsored, a million years ago, was to make for the extended lunch hour to be more hospitable to al fresco dining and so forth. Is that something that you and Amy have heard from planning staff? Because we talked about this as we're planning for the State Street experiment, that it's something that we believe isn't being enforced as vigorously as it had been a few years back.
I haven't heard it from as part of the planning piece. I've heard it as just general complaints that have come through. And so enforcement staff have been reminded that this ordinance is still in place and we should be enforcing it. So I'm hoping there's been an increase in the last couple of weeks, because I did get a couple of complaints on it. But they should be down there enforcing it on a regular basis. But I can check in with Amy on that.
That would be awesome. Yeah, thanks so much. I hope that you're right. We haven't had a meeting in the last several weeks, but it's something, again, that comes up a lot with State Street stakeholders, where they're wondering, well, how are we going to make deliveries work with this experiment on Lower State Street next year? And we'll enforce it anyway, the last few years. So I appreciate that very much. Thank you. Thanks for all your responses this evening.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mayor.
Thank you, Alder. Are there other questions for parking? Seeing none, Stephanie, you beat Matt Tucker. Well done. And thank you very much.
Congratulations. Your first operating budget presentation, and you won.
Thank you.
I didn't warn managers that there was a competition in advance. We will go. There's
I think a lot of the PIO discussion might not be
fair. Should not count against Stephanie. That's right.
Thank you.
We do still have two agencies though, so you never know. And next up is traffic engineering, and engineer Tao is here.
Thank you, Mayor. Good evening, everyone. So thank you for the opportunity to discuss traffic engineering's 2024 operating budget with you. My name is Yan Tao. I manage the city's traffic engineering division. I also have my colleague, Keith Pollack, here with me. So he's our transportation operations analyst, and he will also be, assisting answer questions. I want to start with a few highlights of our 2024 operating budget. As you know, that we are one of the most frequently contacted city agencies. And in 2024, we plan to continue to offer 7 major services for our residents and visitors, which include pedestrian bicycle services, signing, pavement markings, traffic signals, street lighting, fiber communication, and radio communication. And also what we call kind of big category we call traffic engineering services. So those are including mapping, data, a bunch of permitting programs, and also development review, and also working with neighborhoods on addressing neighborhood traffic issues. Our pedestrian bicycle program also includes the city's crossing guard program, which is well loved by our residents. We are also actually working with finance staff through results management process, and there's some thoughts of splitting fiber communication as one separate service. So in future budgets, we may be looking at 8 services instead of 7. In the last few years, we have been more proactively addressing the needs of our growing community and promoting greater public safety with a stronger focus on equity, engagement, and sustainability. You see all of that in our programs such as Vision Zero, Complete Green Streets, Safe Streets Madison, our signal timing, and the citywide LED conversion project. And I'm happy to report that we made a significant progress in all those areas. And we see the safety data improve in the last few years. And we are seeing increased investments in traditionally underserved neighborhoods by a significant margin. And we did a lot of active engagement of our residents through programs such as Let's Talk Street. And last year we did some calculation. We found that we charged over 1,500 residents through those programs, such as piggyback on Parks Alive events and going to those neighborhoods that we typically don't hear from. So that has been very helpful to our operation. We also are promoting pedestrian, bicycle, and transit services become more multimodal. We have so in 2023, we were ranked as the second safest city for pedestrians among the 100 largest metropolitan areas in the country. And we are one of the 5 platinum level bike cities, and we also became a gold level walk friendly cities in the country. And also, as you know, that we have been collaborating with our partners in Metro, helping them promote transit use. Our programs such as the streetlight LED conversion project also help reduce our carbon footprint from the transportation system. We are facing significantly increased workload due to the growth of the city, the higher level of service that our residents demanded, and we responded and provided. And also due to a few major initiatives that we have started in the last few years, such as Vision Zero. We still continue to face pressure from inflation, labor shortage, and supply chain issues. But those things are definitely getting better. And we also continue to face challenges of increased cost on electricity, mostly rate hikes. For example, the distribution charge from IMG increased by almost 17%, and the wattage rate increased by 6.66%. So our LED streetlight conversion project is really timely on that. So it we actually reduce our usage for electricity, but that's not enough to offset the cost increase. Next slide, please. So we have a few major changes on positions. The most significant one is a new traffic engineer 1 position in our traffic signal section. So that section, has seen a lot of increased work as we take on new things, such as retiming our signals to Madison speed, and to work with Metro Transit to help move the buses through our signals faster, and also to be more friendly for pedestrians and the bicycles. So we're facing a lot of pressure on that, and this position will really help us. As Justin mentioned, we will allocate half of its time and salary to Metro Transit to support implementing and maintaining the transit signal priority system. So we're responsible for 50% of the cost, which is about $50,000. And again, this position will help to sustain and broaden our efforts on TSP and also other Metro Forward initiatives. The second change is the public information officer position being moved from parking to support all divisions in transportation department. And here I want to second the mayor and thank Stephanie for her generosity, sharing the position. We have already actually been tapping into this position for quite a bit, for traffic engineering user releases, and also lots of kind of Vision Zero engagement and the newsletters, things like that. Even though I think we are plan to share 25% of the cost, actually I fully expect that we may actually end up using more of our share. So yeah, thanks to everyone in advance for that. This will help each division more accurately and effectively convey information internally and externally in a proactive manner, as discussed. And the final change is, the new IT specialist 2 position. So traffic engineering will have a 25% share of it. It will help each agency to correlate and more efficiently adapt and implement technological changes. So really appreciate the additional support, from the mayor on our work. And I include the kind of diagram here showing that from 2019 to 2022, we increased our project delivery quite a bit. Actually, we more than quadrupled our projects delivered in our CIP in that time frame. If we look at the 2023 budget, actually that's even more. But I don't think that's fair because there's a lot of dollars included for some federal grants we are pursuing. So we haven't got those yet. So I think the 2022 number would be more fair on that. But again, so our workload has been increasing quite a bit, and these positions will really help us on those. Next slide, please. And also really quickly, we have supplemental request to hire a consultant to complete a new state mandate to, every year, we have to report and verify all the city's traffic signals and the crossing lights at all the railroad crossings in the city, to making sure that they are sequenced and timed correctly to avoid any, dangers of malfunction. So this will be ongoing cost of $50,000 every year. We also are receiving $177,000 to offset the electricity costs increase, and $10,000 for our epoxy pavement marking program, as the price just keep going up. unfortunately. This also includes $100,000 for our public safety radio system, which actually was already negotiated as a contract in the past. So this was not included in the cost to continue, so it's added here to account for that. We also making a change to lower our intergovernmental revenue on maintaining traffic signals by $28,000, based on the current data, and also due to staff resource limitations. So as the city grows, that we simply don't have the resources, to work on other communities' projects, and unless we get more staff resources to get a revenue. So that's kind of the supplemental request under changes, and I include a kind of graph, showing the positive changes on traffic safety in the city in the last few years. So since we started Vision Zero in 2020, we have seen a 29% reduction of fatalities and serious injuries in the city. At the meantime, you all know that the story is very different, nationally, and even regionally, in the Dane County area. So that's all my presentation, and I'm happy to answer any questions.
Thank you, Yang. Questions for traffic engineering? Going once? Going twice? You were clear enough to answer all questions in advance. Thank you, Yang.
Thank you, everyone.
And then last but not least is transportation and Director Lynch.
Great. I only have about 8 slides, or maybe I don't. I'll just briefly, it's been a long night, I'll briefly review our services and tell you the changes, and then you can ask questions. Transportation manages the transportation divisions or departments, which include traffic engineering, parking, and metro transit. Helps oversee key transportation initiatives, including the East-West BRT, North-South BRT, Amtrak, Complete Green Streets, intercity bus terminal. I think we have more going on now than we have in many years. Changes. The PIO currently in the parking division will be transferred to the transportation department and serve all 3 divisions. We hope that 50% of that position will be funded to support capital projects. If you think about the public meetings that we have going on with North-South BRT, Amtrak, Safe Streets Madison, it's just an enormous amount of coordination, and it would be helpful to have that person able to help in many different directions. Recreates a vacant parking GIS IT to Specialist 2 within IT. Transportation will help fund that. It also includes a $30,000 grant for grant consultant to pursue the bipartisan infrastructure law opportunities. There have been instances where we've used a certain firm, and they've helped us with.
Thank you, Mayor. Tom, what's going to be the process moving forward for the Transportation Committee to check in on the Complete Green Streets process, as now it includes subdivisions?
Yeah, I believe there's the Transportation Commission has the authority to modify the Complete Green Streets policy manual, all the parts that are not specifically mandated by the ordinance. I think the intent was to wait for one round of projects to go through using that policy, and then to come to the Transportation Commission with suggested changes. That policy manual gets quite detailed as far as recommended terrace widths, recommended lane widths, recommended sidewalk widths, and so there is probably a lot of opportunity for change, but we did want to get through one round, capital street construction round, using it before we started making changes.
it just seems like tomorrow night will be the first effort at the challenges. So I'm interested in learning more how it works with the whole side. Thank you.
Yeah, and if you'd like, it is compared to other cities' complete streets policies, ours is perhaps more complicated, but it's also more detailed. It provides more guidance than many other cities' complete green streets policy. So if you'd like, we could set up a meeting and kind of go through, well, here's the table, and this is how you would use the table for this or that.
Yeah, and I'd like to add in like how the fire department, what power they have, but let's do that. Thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you, Alder Verveer.
Thank you, Mayor, for the last time tonight. Hi, Tom. Thanks for your presentation. And thank you for your note the other day about the updated schedule for the passenger rail PIM. So I just wanted to ask you to give the opportunity to share with the rest of us that information, since it's an update from our colloquy during the capital budget hearing last month.
Yeah, thanks for allowing me to do that. We have hired a project planner that's now the project manager for the passenger rail study. We have gotten a draft document together, and that we were hoping to present to the public and to the committees in October, late October, that would provide a screening of about 8 different sites. We had an internal meeting that included various departments, including the mayor's office, and I think the consensus from that meeting was we didn't have enough detail. We should probably add a couple more analysis pieces. And so that will probably take us, maybe 4 weeks to do the additional analysis. And so depending on how the holidays fall, between Thanksgiving and Christmas, we'll either have that meeting this side of the Christmas or the holidays, or immediately after. Yeah.
Thanks for sharing that update. Thank you, Mayor.
Thank you, Alder. Are there any other questions for transportation? Alder Miadze.
Hello, Tom. Thanks for the presentation. I didn't hear you say anything about the north and south BRT. Just wanted to see if you could touch on that.
Yeah, and actually, it was on my slide, but I was trying to be brief so that everyone could go home. Yeah, we are in the process of kicking off the north-south bus rapid transit, and we have a pretty intensive inter-engagement schedule. We'll be having a public involvement meeting for the south on November 1st, for the north on November 2nd. I think on November 8th, we'll have a virtual public meeting. November 9th, I believe we're presenting to Fitchburg, and we'll have a public meeting with Fitchburg. We've been meeting with alders, trying to update them on kind of what it looks like and what might be accomplished. And we are also engaging with different stakeholder groups that will be affected, such as Urban League, Central Hispano, Northside, River Food Pantry, those types of organizations. So it's very busy. I'm very glad that we have an additional staff person to take Philip's place. Her name is Liz, and she's doing great so far. And so that's kind of the status. We hope to have a locally preferred alternative by February, so that we can move through the process and capture as much of the bipartisan infrastructure funding that's available.
Thank you, Alder. Alder Vidver.
Just to follow up on that, Tom. So my understanding is the route is already in place from the redesign, so there wouldn't be necessarily new routes started, or would that be a possibility potentially with additional federal funding?
Yeah, we're hoping that the route is pretty well set, but there's still quite a few project aspects that there's opportunity. Like, for instance, we think we know where the stations are, but those could shift. We think we know how we're going to deal with the south transfer point, but that could change. We think we have a good idea where the north and south terminal should be, but that could change. And then, particularly on Park Street, there's an opportunity to redefine what that street cross section looks like. Perhaps we could provide a bicycle facility that's protected, which would be really great. We are trying to fit 10 pounds of potatoes in an 8-pound sack, but it'd be nice if we could make Park Street a nicer street. And so there's a lot of variables that go with that. And so I think there's ample opportunity for citizens to say yes or no, or here or there.
Thank you, Alder. Any other questions for transportation? Seeing none, thank you, Tom. That is the last agency for tonight. So the item before us is Legistar 79918, the 2024 Executive Operating Budget. President Curry, a motion to refer to the council for a public hearing, please.
So moved.
Second, please.
Second.
Thank you. Is there any further discussion? Is there any objection to recording unanimous vote in favor? Seeing no objection, the item is referred, and a motion to adjourn would be in order.
Second.
Moved and seconded to adjourn. Is there any objection to recording unanimous vote in favor? Seeing no objection, have a good night, everyone.